Before we begin, Dr. Cortez, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Cortez. I'm one of the core faculty at Pacific Oaks. And before I joined Pacific Oaks, I was in consulting in the K-12 arena, both locally, nationally, and internationally, did work there. And before that, I was an administrator, principal, and before that, I worked as a teacher. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right, well, let's go ahead and jump in. So just to give you all an idea of how the day is going to go, Dr. Cortez and I, with our years of experience, know that sitting and listening to people talk at you for 4 hours is never good, particularly when you're in an online environment. So there is going to be a mixture of us sharing information, and then we will put you into breakout rooms and give you the opportunity to really talk with one another and learn from everyone's experiences, but also give you time to reflect and engage in some conversation about what we are sharing with you. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into managing the classroom. This is probably the one of, even for teachers, like classroom management is often something that you grow and define over time. Teaching is definitely a craft that takes multiple years to develop, and the same is completely true for those who are substitutes and walking into the classroom. So we wanted to share some strategies that will set you up for success once you walk into the classroom. Again, as we were kind of creating and planning out this presentation, we really had in mind not just those one day at a time jobs that you might pick up, but if a teacher has to go on family leave and you might be in the classroom for 6 weeks, these strategies will be very helpful for you. Depending it won't really matter when you come in. If you start the school year with the students or come in the middle of the school year, these are some strategies that can help you really build those relationships with students and make sure that they come into your classroom ready to learn. So the first one is talking to students before class. So when I was in the at Blair, we had some strategies we all had to engage in every day, and one of those was meet and greet. So I taught secondary, so I saw students every hour. I had a new group of students come through. But even for elementary age, this works. And that is asking students to line up, saying good morning, saying hello, asking students how they are, and letting them file into the classroom one at a time. It really gives you and the students that moment to just engage person to person before you really dig into that academic piece. This one is students are excellent judges of character. So this kind of falls under that fake it till you make it. Like, if you enter the classroom as if this is your classroom, you are in control of this classroom, you will identify the expectations for the day. That can go a long way with students. Presence in a classroom is a lot of it. Always have a backup plan in mind. So I always talk about predictive problem solving. Before I start a class or as I'm engaged in a lesson, I kind of always try to think about where could there be an opportunity for students to act up or try to push things or not engage. And I always try to have a backup plan in place for when I predict that moment is going to happen. And then you just, something goes wrong. In today's world, it might be technology. So maybe students can't log in, or maybe something that the teacher has prepared isn't working, because we know that technology and apps sometimes don't work for us. Or maybe the teacher asks you to make copiers, and that's the day the copier decides to break down. You really want to think about some alternative activities that you can have in place for students that you can just quickly transition to, regardless of the situation, and keep the class moving as if there's nothing wrong. This one, you don't want to get too friendly. I have seen a lot of adults walk into a classroom and, you know, they're trying to be friends with the kids or having a good time. And it's not that I'm encouraging you not to smile, not to be kind to students, because they need you to be kind. But don't go in and acting like you're going to be their friend and their buddy and you're going to let them do whatever they want. Because what's going to happen is, if you set that precedent, every time you walk into that classroom, they're going to expect that. And it's always a little harder to tighten the reins with students than to come in, have very high expectations for their behavior. And you can always loosen that a little bit as you get to know them, versus the flip where you start out too friendly, too loose, and then you try to tighten expectations because suddenly you're going to be in the classroom for 6 weeks. Usually, teachers already have a classroom discipline plan in place. Follow these. And I promise you, students will always say, but our teacher lets us, or our teacher doesn't follow that. There's a reason that teacher has that discipline plan in place, and they do follow it. And so you want to walk into that classroom and continue and follow those expectations and those routines and those procedures and that discipline plan, just like the teacher does, and really set those expectations from the moment students walk in the door. So if you say like, okay, we're going to come in, we're going to start our bell ringer, or we're going to get started on some silent sustained reading for a little bit, and teacher and students engage in a way that doesn't align with that, you need to talk to them and make sure that you really follow the plan that the teacher has in place.
Yeah, I think I just want to add on to that. I think one of the things you really want to do is you want to make sure that you're helping students understand what the expectations are, right? That's really one of the big things. So you're going to, as Dr. Marchesso had pointed out, the teacher probably has already a plan there for you. You want to make sure you're following it, but you want to make sure you also let students know, like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's when I want you to do it. So that it's in one of the things, and I know this from because when I first started teaching, and I started doing some substitute teaching, and one of the mistakes I made was I'd ask students, like, okay, what does your teacher have you guys do for this, right? And I'd get like 3 different answers, and then it become, a little bit of a no, we don't do it that way, we do it this way, we do it that, no, that's not the way we're supposed to do it. And then you're kind of like trying to figure out which of the students, and then it gets a little frustrating. So the more that you take a look at what the teachers outlined for you, and then you say, this is the way we're going to do it, you're not asking students, how do we do this? Because again, that could create a little bit of a problem for you.
Okay. Our next piece of advice is to avoid confrontations. Don't let the students see that you're getting flustered or frustrated with them. Try not to lose your temper. Don't get into an argument one-on-one with a student for the rest of the class to watch, because this can often lead to some other issues that you then have to deal with in the classroom. So one way, if you do have a student who is just really pushing back or talking back or being disrespectful, it's very helpful to actually have the student step to the side of the classroom or in a space where you can talk to them one-on-one and the rest of the class can't necessarily hear what's going on. If it gets to the point where the student definitely is not responding to you as the authority figure in the room, then you might need to call the office for assistance and have someone come up and talk to that student, or pull them out for a few minutes while you get the class moving into the direction you want it to move. Okay? And definitely, if you do get into it with a student, don't hang on to it if you're going to be there another day. Right? Don't go back into that classroom already prepared to get into an argument with that student or expecting to get into an argument with that student. One thing I really found with children, particularly those of the middle age grade levels, is that they often forget about the confrontation or what was said or what happened after they leave the classroom. And so the biggest mistake we can make as adults is we hang on to that and continue to bring it up or continue to treat that student in a way as if we never moved on from the last interaction we had with them.
And you want to make sure that you're always talking about not them, but about the choice that they made, that they, this was the expectation, or this was the rule, and this is this is the rule, this is the rule that you didn't follow, this is how you're supposed to follow it, things like that. So it doesn't become about the student. And as Dr. Marchesso said, you let that go. And it makes a big difference for students. And I remember when I was teaching, I had one student that I had a consequence, and and then I also had to do yard duty, and I was out of doing yard duty, and I was talking to the student who I just consequenced in the room. And he said, Mr. Cortez, you're talking to me? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, I thought you were mad at me. I said, no, I'm not mad at you. I said, that was just a choice that you made. That wasn't a good choice. You always can make better choices. So we do it based on the choices that they're making, not on the person. So if we let go of it, as Dr. Marchesso said, then we can continue to have that good relationship with the students.
Yes, great point. It actually just reminded me a couple of days ago, I was in a classroom and this teacher was doing a demonstration and had a little red ball that, was the students were using to help engage in this demonstration. And one young man decided it was a soft, squishy ball, so it wasn't anything that could hurt somebody, but he decided to start bouncing it off the head of the person sitting next to him. So I just went over to him and said, may I please have the ball? Now, this is not my classroom. I'm visiting this classroom, but still there's certain things I can't let go, and that's one of them. So he said, why? And I said, because when you start hitting other people, I have a problem with that. And so I really put it back on me and my feelings. And he continued to push and just said, why again? And he's like, but she didn't mind. And I'm like, this isn't about her. And if she minded or not, this is about me and I mind, and please give me the ball. And he eventually did. That would have been a time when I could have really just gotten into an argument with that student and talked about how out of control his behavior was. And that's not appropriate. You don't do that. But I chose to turn it a little bit on to how I felt about it. So, and he couldn't argue with that because it became about me and what I didn't like to see happening in the classroom. And give praise. Students want to be recognized, and your praise doesn't need to go above and beyond. Like, oh, great job, you wrote your name on the paper. Like, students know when it's fake praise. But even just recognizing when students are doing what you ask them to do, that often will remind other students what they're supposed to be doing. And they too will then start doing that, hoping that they will be recognized. Demonstrate that you respect the students. I think often we forget students are just small humans. So those things that we like to have in our day-to-day life, our students are the same, right? They want to know that they're being recognized for doing something correctly or something that they've been asked to do. Make sure students know that you really believe in them, that they can do the activity that you're asking them to do, that they can be successful. I've seen some wonderful things like creating petals on a flower every time the students are caught in good behavior, really focusing on the good that is happening in the classroom and focusing less on the negative things that are happening in the classroom. When you do that, students will want that praise, they'll want that recognition, and they will start to engage in behavior that will get them there.
Yes, and Mrs. Kimberly, who put down that we forget to tell students why we give them positive praise. I think that's always, and that's what Dr. Marchesso was talking about. Empty praise, like, oh, you're doing so good. That doesn't really mean anything. But if you tell students, you're very effective when you can say, oh, you did that really well because, and then give them reasons why. Or, I really appreciate the way that you are doing this, and give them the reason why you're giving them the praise. Because the purpose of the praise is really to help students to continue to do that, what you're praising. So if you don't tell them what you're praising and why you're praising them, then they don't really know what they did. So you want to kind of remind them. For the younger students, especially in the primary and intermediate grades, sometimes that is really beneficial when it comes to classroom management, to be able to say, oh, I appreciate the way that these students have taken out their book quietly. I appreciate that. And they, oh, okay, the teacher's recognizing that and they want to do the same thing. Those things are effective. It's, if you're in middle school, it's not as effective, but at least know that when it comes to the primary grades and the intermediate grades, that it's very effective to praise students, let them know what they're being praised for, because sometimes that can affect other students and behavior as well.
I'm actually going to say it does work with middle school and high school, because I taught both. So not to the point where, like I'm cheerleading them, but just recognizing like, oh, Jose's on page 46, recognizing that they're doing what I asked them to do. Many times I had seventh graders like, Miss Marchesso, I'm on, page 46. And I'm like, yes, you are. Thank you. So just that,
Yeah, everybody wants praise. I agree with you.
Yes.
Everybody wants praise. And I think it's always good,
Yep.
Anytime, and any student, anybody, even adults, we want praise. So I think it's very good.
Yes, we do. All right. And then keep students busy. And this is why we want to spend a significant amount of time today, allowing you guys time to really dig into some websites and to find some lesson plans or things that you can bring into the classroom as kind of a backup, because the moment students have the ability to have some free time, that can often lead to a lot of chaos in the classroom. So you definitely want to follow the lesson plan that the classroom teacher has left for you. Provide explicit instructions as much as possible. So that's being very detailed and clear on what the students need to be doing. And then just in case the lesson plan is not enough, because sometimes depending on how quickly the teacher has had to call in sick or find out that they're not going to be in the classroom the next day, and I'm sure I've been guilty of this, sometimes the lesson plan they leave is not as robust as it might be if, the teacher was there the full day. And so the students might finish a little sooner, particularly if it's just busy work they've been asked to do. So maybe have a trivia game ready to go. Or, if you speak a second language, you can, teach some students common words or phrases in that language. Have students write a story about it. That's a prop you bring to class, or have a prompt for them ready. Like, tell me a story about someone you consider your hero. What do you like to do outside of school? Do you have a memorable family event or a favorite sport or a favorite video game, right? Nowadays, kids have so many video games on iPads and devices, so they can even, talk about that. Something that gives them a prompt that gives them something they can write about that they know a lot about and will keep them busy for that remaining time. Okay. Another great idea is establishing a quiet signal. So this is something that you would establish the moment when they walk into the classroom, as you're setting those expectations. How are you going to get their attention? When you're ready to give instructions, how are you going to let them know that you need them to stop talking and to listen to what they need to do next? So one that worked for me is I always counted down from 5. It allowed my students who were talkers to feel like they were able to finish up what they needed to say before they refocused. I use this every day, multiple times a day, so they knew what that signal was. I've heard in younger grades, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Students respond 1, 2, eyes on you. There's so many different ways out there to establish that quiet signal. Some teachers clap, cute little jingles. I clearly was not that creative in the classroom, but I've seen a lot of more creative teachers engaging. But that's something that you will teach the students at the beginning of the class or at the beginning of the day, reminding them throughout the day. If you're in a classroom for 6 hours with the same students, you're going to have to remind them throughout the day and have them practice that quiet signal. But something so they know, okay, I need to stop what I'm doing and I need to look at the teacher. we're moving on to the next activity. Okay, and so now we are going to show a video about just kind of how proximity can be used to manage behavior. And I'm pausing because I can't remember if I shared optimal for sound. So if you can't hear the sound, please let me know, and I will have to reshare, making sure I'm optimized for sound and video. Does this sound good, Dr. Cortez?
There's no sound.
That's what I was afraid of. So give me just a second. So sorry. You know, if we didn't have at least one tech issue, it would not be a true training.
Again, as Dr. Marchesso had mentioned, you know, there are different things. I used chimes when I would try to get students' attention when I was in the classroom, and I didn't have to raise my voice. I just hit the chimes. And again, that's what, if you show students, here's what I'm going to do to get your attention, and then kind of practice it with them a little bit. And then when you do it, it'll be effective. When you practice something and let students know what's going to be happening, it makes a big difference.
All right, thank you. Let's try again.
Exactly what you need to do to answer this question appropriately. Okay? All right, so personal insight questions. So I need to see all of your screens right now at number one.
Proximity is such an important instrument in classroom management. It's a way of really making sure that you work the entire crowd, you have control of your entire classroom regardless of where your student's sitting. If you're consistently moving throughout the class period, you really are able to engage all of your students. So when I think about proximity in my classroom, I think of areas. I think of 3 specific areas. I think of an area right where I am, which I would consider to be the red zone. I think of an area that's just outside that zone, which is a yellow zone, if we're going to go with this, traffic light symbols. And then there's the area on the very outside, and that'll be your green area. So with the red area, these are the students that are 100% engaged. My presence is right there. If they have a question, they're more than likely to pop that hand up. The students right on the outside of them, that's your yellow area. So they're watching you, they're watching your moves, they're making eye contact with you, but the second you turn their head, they may be the students that might turn to a friend and make eye contact with them or nod their head, And then my green area, that's my area that I need to get to probably next. Those are the students that are waiting for me to turn my back. Those are the students who are watching every move because they know I can easily do this and then they're going to do something. So I'm never in just one spot. I'm always constantly moving, and so those areas are constantly changing. And so it can just take 2 steps to move one student from a red zone to a yellow zone. It could just take 2 steps to move a green zone to a red zone. So just constantly moving, you're going to have complete classroom management. Your students will know that you are aware of what's going on and that you have control. One of my favorite things about proximity, other than it being a huge classroom management tool, is it really does build student rapport as well as student confidence. There are a lot of students who are afraid to ask questions, and if you are parked at one point of your classroom and you're not really moving, they're not going to want to raise their hand because then they're worried about what other students are thinking of them or whether it's a dumb question. If you're walking through your classroom and you are constantly moving, you'll notice that as you're walking, those hands are going to pop up wherever you are. And so you're building that confidence by immediately giving them the feedback they want. You're looking at their work to make sure that they're accessing the standard or skill. You're getting that immediate formative feedback, but you're also building that rapport with that student as well. You're being approachable for that student.
Okay, so we wanted to share that video because proximity works with individuals of all ages. I use it in my PD with adults. It works really well with students of all ages. Just them knowing that you are moving around the room constantly, that you are keeping an eye on what they're doing, that you are looking to make sure that they are staying on task, that they are not trying to talk to their friend across the room, that they're not getting distracted. That does a lot to keep students focused and on task in the classroom. Okay. So we have another video to show you as it relates to classroom management. And as you watch this video, I want you to think about how this teacher greets the students, how she communicated expectations to the students, and the actions of the teacher throughout this video. And keep these in mind because after this video, we're actually going to put you into breakout rooms to discuss these 3 guiding questions.
Will we get it like a 5-minute break?
We will give a break in between at some point today, but we will be giving breaks throughout the day. Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning. My line looks so perfect already. Face forward for me, hands to your side. Face forward for me, hands to your side, 0 voice. Face forward for me, hands to your side, 0 voice. Thank you. Grab the line. Awesome. Wow, look at this. Hands to your side, facing forward. Good morning, Kiana. Welcome. All right, my friends. Are we ready to go? Yes? All right, we're going to walk to the end of the ramp, my friends. If you left your backpack on the side of the
So as opposed to getting started right away with standards, establish the culture that's going to happen in your classroom throughout the year. It allows students to feel comfortable and also get them to understand what you expect of them and then get to know how the classroom works.
Welcome. Look at that smile. Good
At the
morning.
beginning of the day, I always stand at the door and I greet students with either a high five, a fist bump, a handshake, or a hug towards the end of the school year. I just like to set my day off right with a positive tone. Who doesn't want to have a nice smiling face when they come in for work, basically? This is their job, you can consider. So when they come in, I like them to feel like I want them here, that I've been waiting for them to get here. And I believe that when you start your day off like that, you're setting them up for a positive day.
Right now, we're going to get your desk organized first, okay? So go ahead and take your binder off and you can put it down next to your table, or next to your seat. Just quickly on the floor is fine. You can check it out while you do so. In your desk, you're going to have 2 sides, a right side and a left side. And one side is going to be for your soft books, and the other side will be for your hard books. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to find your left hand.
It's important to invest a lot of time in your routines at the beginning of the year because that's when you have the most time to establish them. So I start at the beginning and I spend a lot of time on my routines, my expectations, doing things again, and even doing things again. And as the time goes throughout the school year, I have to spend less and less time, and those things become second nature to the students.
And you're going to put your My World Social Studies book on the left-hand side of your desk. And it goes in this way, not this way. So when I look in your desk, I should see pages, not spine, okay? Go ahead and do that now.
So the procedure for their desk organization is really simple. All their books that are paperbacked books, I like on one side of their desk, and then their hardback books are on the other side of the desk. That way, when I ask students for a particular book, they can look in their desk, they know what side it's on, and they can get it easily. I want students to be able to access what they need very quickly. Transitions are very important, and they can take a lot of time if they're not established at the beginning. So I try to alleviate any hurdles from students that might cause my transitions to run long. And not being able to find something or something not being in its proper place is something that makes a transition very difficult. Using the restroom during your recess, using the restroom during your lunch, is you showing me and everyone else around you that you are responsible. However, I do understand that things happen, right? Sometimes things happen. If you're in class and you have to go, you have to go. And so when that happens, you put one finger, just one, in the air, and then you wait for a nonverbal cue for me to tell you to go to the restroom. And it'll usually look like this. You put your finger up, I'll point at you, and then I'll point at the door. And that means that you may go. Okay? Now, show me the restroom sign. Thank you. Notice that there is no Miss Martin with it. It's not Mrs. Martin. That nonverbal signal is something that I can do while I continue to teach. So if I see a pencil hanging in the air, I can just go like this and continue talking. The same with going to the restroom or going to water, so it doesn't interrupt the flow of the lessons. I am going to teach you how to come from your seat to the carpet to meet with me, okay? So in order to do that, we need to be able to know exactly where we're going and exactly how we're supposed to get there, okay? So we're going to take some time, and I'm going to show you exactly where I want you to sit and how I want you to get there quickly, okay? So for my ELA transition, I start with students' numbers, usually alphabetical at first, and then I give them an exact spot to sit on at the carpet. And then I explain to them exactly what I want them to do. When you hear your number or your name, I want you to get up, push your chair in, and come to this particular seat. Sarah, Adam, and Kaden, come. It's important to make sure that students are following your expectations on the first day of school, on the first week of school, because if students know exactly what it is you want them to do, or in this instance, exactly where it is you want them to sit, then they can rely on that, and that makes your transition so much faster, and then you can get to things like your lesson much quicker. No, honey, sit right next to her. Scoot up right next to her. Scoot up right next to her. During that ELA transition, I had them practice it over and over again because I want for them to know exactly where they sit so that they can get there quickly. Please join me on the carpet. It took us 1 minute and 8 seconds, which is not too bad, okay? As we continue to go throughout the school year, we are going to be looking to chop down just a little bit, second by second, at that time, okay? But look at, everybody remembers where they're supposed to go. Give yourselves a round of applause. That was very good for the first time. Think about where your spot is, because I'm going to set the timer. Remember, it took us 1 minute, 8 seconds yesterday. Let's see if we can shave a little bit of time off of that today. Go. "56 seconds. Good job, my friends. Excellent work. All right, my friends. So Brennan, kids pick up on things, your attitude, your behavior. So you want to be very cautious of those things at the beginning of the school year, because students are looking at every piece of you as a teacher, and they're also looking at every piece piece of your classroom. So you want to make sure that you're warm, you want to make sure that your classroom is inviting, that they can see themselves as part of this classroom, and that they know that you want them to be there and that this is a safe place for them to be throughout the school day.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to day 2 of 4th grade. How are you feeling? Good. Did you go home yesterday completely exhausted? Yes. I was so tired yesterday, and guess what? My legs were super sore. Yours were too? My legs were
so now that we've wrapped up the first week of school, I am just scratching the surface of working on routines and procedures. It's something I will carry with us the entire school year. At the beginning of the year is not when you stop working on routines and procedures. And every time you introduce something new to students, you need to establish a routine and a procedure for what it is that you're introducing.
It's a signal to me that you need help on directions just a little bit.
All right, so I know a lot of that was talking about a teacher starting out the year, but again, remember there might be times when you will be starting out a school year as the teacher in place. You might be stepping in as a long-term sub, but even in a day-to-day job or position, you want the students to really understand what your expectations, what your routines are for that classroom that day. And so a lot of these procedures and routines can be taught in the beginning of the day. It'll make the rest of your day go much smoother. Okay, so now we've been talking for a lot. So now we're gonna pause for a little bit and we are gonna have you go into breakout rooms. And as you're in breakout rooms, discuss how students were greeted. What did you notice? How were the expectations communicated to the students? And then what were the actions of the teacher throughout that time?
Yeah, so once we send you to breakout room, you're gonna get an invite. You click on that invite to join the breakout room. You're gonna have about 7 minutes. Good chance there's gonna be either 2 or 3 of you in the room. When you get in there, make sure that you unmute yourself so that when you start talking, people can hear you. And please turn on your video when you get into the breakout room so people can see you, who they're talking with. Again, there'll be about 2 or 3 of you in the room when we do the breakout rooms, okay? So you'll get a message when the breakout room is gonna end, like in about 60 seconds, it'll say, and then you don't have to do anything. It'll bring you back automatically into the main room, all right? So,
Dr. Cortez, the breakout room will be recorded too?
the breakout room will not be recorded. It only records the main room. And I've restarted the recording.
Great.
Oh, wow.
Just a reminder, because I know many of you were able to unmute and talk to one another, just to check your mic and make sure that it is muted. Really helps reduce some background noise and feedback that sometimes we will hear as a result of this fun location that is Zoom. All right, I hope you got to engage with some others in the group. This will not be the first time. I should say this is the first time in breakout rooms. It will not be the last time that we place you in breakout rooms.
So Jodi, I just have a very fast question, if that's okay.
Yes.
Like how we pick up assignments like at the Pasadena Unified School District? Like, is it like on the internet or like we get a phone call?
I believe it's both, but that will be a great question for Hannah when she jumps in at 12:30.
Okay, thank you so much.
It might be through like Frontline or like phone calls.
Mm-hmm. I think each district has their own process for asking and calling out to subs. I know our system, I believe, does phone calls. It might also have an email based, or there's a variety of ways that we reach out to subs to pick up jobs. Okay, so we are going to wrap up classroom management with one more video, 6 classroom management mistakes and what to do instead. And then we are going to transition into a quick break. And then Dr. Cortez is going to take the lead, and we're going to talk about some instructional strategies that you can use in the classroom.
And some misbehavior is just a healthy part of a child. Sometimes misbehavior or inattention isn't what it seems. For many students, it stems from boredom or restlessness, seeking attention from peers, behavioral disorders, or struggling with issues at home. And some misbehavior is just a healthy part of a child's social and emotional development. Here are 6 common classroom management mistakes and what the research suggests you should do instead. A strategy that works for one student may backfire for another. Look for patterns in the behavior that might reveal the underlying reasons, and consider checking in with the student to see if the source of the problem can be identified. In a 2018 study, academic frustration explained student misbehavior 20% of the time. Students either didn't understand the assignment, or it was too difficult, and misbehavior was an outlet for their disappointment. You don't have to fix all misbehavior. In fact, trying to do so can actually make things worse in the long run. Negative attention can make students feel marginalized, leading to more behavioral issues later on. Instead, highlight positive conduct like finishing work on time or efficiently transitioning between activities. Data walls, behavior charts, and other public displays of misbehavior don't improve student conduct, according to a 2019 study. Instead of calling students out publicly, approach them privately and encourage them to reflect on the wrongdoing, think about its source, and take responsibility for addressing it. You can't expect kids to work with you without putting in the emotional labor. Demanding compliance will often result in kids rebelling, testing boundaries, or engaging in power struggles. Try proactive strategies like positive greetings at the door, co-creating classroom norms, and building and maintaining strong relationships. Are all students being treated equally and fairly? Teachers often give Black students fewer warnings to correct their misbehavior, for example, when compared to their white peers. School systems must address broader discipline policies, but within classrooms, teachers can start by reflecting on their own implicit biases. They can also make it a practice to regularly review their disciplinary measures to see if there are areas for improvement.
All right. And that ends our morning with classroom management. So why don't we go ahead and take a 5-minute break?
15.
Well, I don't know if we can do 15 now. Our goal is to split the breaks up. So we have 4 main sections. We want to kind of split the breaks up throughout the morning. So we're not doing it all now. And then we come back and sit for another 3 hours. So let's go ahead and I'll split the difference. Let's take a 7-minute break, and then we will come back and engage with instructional strategies. So we will see you in 7 minutes, which will be 10:19. So we'll come back together at 10:19.
See you guys soon.
See you soon.
And then start part 2 of our presentation this morning.
Yeah, so welcome back. Hopefully everyone made their way back. I do want to start before we talk about the instructional strategies, and you know, you had a chance to be able to discuss in your breakout rooms. And one of the things I think that were really effective in that, especially that last video, is watching how that teacher can continue to set expectations, continue to remind students about the expectation. When she's walking that line, say, okay, remember, hands to your side, 0 talking. She continue to do that. And that when we saw the video about the 6 common mistakes, one of one of the mistakes is not setting expectations and not outlining what those expectations are, letting students know what those expectations are. It's kind of like if you're taking your child to the store and you say to them, oh, I want you to be good when we go into the store, right? Well, if you don't tell them what good means, good for them and good for you might be two different things. So they might be, oh, good for me is not running too far away. Good for me is not throwing 10 things on the ground, but only throwing 5 things on the ground, whatever that is. But if you were to say to them, look, I want you to be good when we go in the store, that means you're staying close to me, you're not running in the store, you're not grabbing things unless I ask you to grab them, right? You're setting the expectation. You're telling them, here's what the expectations are. And so you always want to do that. And when we saw even in that video, the transitions, where it was like, if you're teaching in an elementary school, you're probably be in multiple subjects. So you just finished teaching reading, now you have to go to math. You have to think about like reminding students, okay, before you do anything, here's what I want you to do. Don't move, here's what I want you to do, here's what I want you to do it. And so you're setting the expectations for them and reminding them what the behavior is that you want to see. Because as they mentioned that the last video we saw before break is students might not be misbehaving because they want to, it's just that it's just the situation, they don't understand what they should be doing, right? So if you tell them what they should be doing, then they know what they should be doing. So it's doing things like that. So sometimes people that are new to the classroom management is one of the things that they tend to struggle with or get worried about. Set the expectations, remind them of what that is. Okay, things go a lot smoother. You just use the proximity, move around the room. So these are all good things that are going to help you out. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. The other is thinking ahead. And when you first get to the classroom and you're the principal or whoever takes you to the classroom, they're going to give you the lesson plan. Get there early and take time to look through the lesson plan and go sit in the classroom and go, okay, they're going to want the students to do this. Think about, look around, where is that? How am I going to do that, right? Like when we saw in the video with the woman with the expectations, and she had binders on the kid's desk, right? You could see when they opened it up, there was nothing in that binder, but they were going to be using that binder. She could have had the binders on the side of the room, but then could have said, okay, everyone, go grab a binder. That could be a little bit chaotic, right? So she kind of thought to herself, hey, instead of having kids go get a binder, I'll just have it for them already on their desk. So when you get to subbing and you walk in that classroom, again, get there early so you can take a look at the lesson plan and then walk yourself through the lesson plan and think about what are the kids going to need at this point, what are they going to need at this point, so that you're prepared and ready and you can outline what the expectations are for that. Okay? All right, so let's talk about some instructional strategies. So when you're going into the subbing, usually everything is laid out for there. This may be something you might need, maybe not need, but you might go in there and there may be the plans might have been last minute. The teacher might have had to leave right away or didn't know they weren't coming in. So they may be very general. So what we want to do is give you some strategies, some instructional strategies that you can use so that if you need to supplement the curriculum or if you become a long-term sub. And usually if you're a long-term sub, they have plans for you maybe the first week, maybe the second week, but then it's up to you to start creating the other plans. We just kind of want to give you that opportunity to kind of talk about some of these things so that way you feel a little bit more prepared. All right. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, great. So one of the easiest strategies, and you can use this even if you do have a plan set for you, is we call it a think, write, pair, share, or any type of pair sharing. And that's having students talk to each other. And what's the purpose of that? Well, here's the reason why we do that. So anytime you're learning something new, your brain is working in what we call working memory, right? It's like you're doing it right now. You're listening to me, you're understanding what I'm saying, but if you don't get a chance to talk about it, write about it, or do something like that, then you could forget it because working memory only holds on to things for so long. And then we drop something. And you've experienced, you know that. Usually they say about 7 things. Realistically, it's about 4 things that we can hold on to. before your brain starts to drop something, okay? Because it's moving forward and kind of trying to understand what is happening right now, all right? So, so think about that. So the think, write, pair, share gives someone time to reflect, right? And then talk about what it is that they're learning. And one of the best ways that you can help any type of learning, your own learning, is to talk about it. If you want to learn something new, the best thing you can do is talk to someone about it. And that's going to help solidify in your own mind about what it is. It's going to move it into long-term memory. So think, write, pair, share is exactly what it sounds like. You can give them a prompt, right? You can add something to write about. So I want you, first you start out by saying, I want you to think about this, right? So let's say we're doing this with you guys, and I would say, okay, I want you to think about what are really some good positive things to do in classroom management. Think about that. And then I would say, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to write down, right? Like some main points, so 3 main points that you found that are effective for classroom management. And so you write that down. And then I say, okay, now I'm going to send you guys to breakout rooms with 2 people. You're going to talk about it. And so now the 2 of you talk about what you wrote. And then we come back and I say, okay, now we're going to share, right? Can some people share what it is that you and your partner talked about? So we're giving opportunities. Now this is really good for students who are English language learners. And the reason why is when you have them, first of all, their thinking is time to process. It's for any student, right? Thinking is time to process. Then they get to write down something. And the writing down is important because when they go to share with somebody, when they go to talk to somebody else, they have something to already talk about because they already wrote it down. I just need to talk about, I need to just talk about what I wrote down, right? And so they feel, especially for students that may be struggling with the language, it will help them out because they're struggling a little bit with the language. They've written it down. All they have to do is just read what they wrote, or it gives them reminders of what they want to talk about, right? So you can do pair shares even without the think right part. You can do turn and talk, we call it, or talk to your neighbor. Sometimes if you've been doing a lot of talking or a lot of things have been happening, it's good sometimes to do a talk to your neighbor so that way they can discuss what it is that they're learning. But the last point I put on there is train the troops. Just like we saw on that one video, if you want to have students to do talk to with each other, you need to remind them about what that's going to look like and how that's going to look. So I would say, all right, you're going to talk to in a moment, you're going to turn and talk to your partner, right? So before you do that, I want you to listen. This is what I'm going to expect. When you guys are talking to each other, one, you're going to be talking about the topic. You're not going to be talking about things that are outside the topic. 2, you're going to take turns talking. So if one person's going to talk and then the other person's going to talk. 3, once that person is done talking, you're going to add on to what they said before you say your thoughts, right? So now I'm kind of doing what that expectation is. I might even, if the students have never done it before, I might even bring up a student and practice with them in front of the class so that the class can see what it's supposed to look like. You also want to give them like who's going to be talking, right? So you could say the taller student talks first, right? The student with longer hair is going to talk first. So you kind of give them an idea about who's going to be doing it so that they're not like going, okay, you go, no, you go, you go, you go, right? I've seen teachers they put on the desk, they put an A and a B so that they could say, okay, A student will talk first, then B student. We're not talking about grades, we're talking about the A person, then B person. So you can do that. So that's the think, write, pair, share. And again, it's something that helps promote understanding. You can do this, again, even if you have a lesson plan already. And you just want to get the kids to be able to talk about a little bit about what it is that they're doing. You can do the think, write, pair, share, turn and talk, pair, share, talk to your neighbor, any of those kind of things. Okay, all right, let's go to the next one. The next activity, which is really good, is called a jigsaw reading. And so a jigsaw sounds, it is what it sounds like, but it usually is used when you need to cover lot of material. Let's say you want students to read a whole section in their textbook, or 10 pages in the text that you have is, well, I should say 10 pages, maybe it's like 3 pages. And you don't want the kids to just sit there and read it on their own. One of the difficulties can be that with some students are going to struggle with the reading, but it could take too long. If I say, okay, you guys are going to read this section in the textbook, and it's like 20 minutes, half an hour, they're still reading. It's like, oh, this is taking too long, right? And so you want to cover the material. So it benefits, one, it makes it easier to cover material quicker, but 2, it does something else. So let me just kind of explain it before I kind of go on to that. So what you do is you have a group of students, 3, 4, doesn't matter, could be 2. They each have a section of the text. So you're going to read the first section. This person's going to read the second section. This person's going to read the third section. And while they're reading, they take notes on what that section is. They become an expert on that particular section. And then they prepare to share to the other group members. And then after you've given them, let's say you give them 5 minutes to read that section and become an expert, or 10 minutes to read that section, become an expert, they come back in their group, and then now each share what that section is about, right? So instead of one person reading all 3 sections, each person only reads 1 section, but then they hear from the other 2 people what the other sections were about. And so it is a way to cover material quicker. 2, it helps that student become an expert on their particular section. And 3, they are able to take notes from the other students so that they have all the information, right? So jigsaw reading, again, is when you want, it's also a good way for collaboration to kind of get students to work together. And what we have to remember, collaboration is a useful skill and a useful tool for students. So anytime we get students collaborating, it's going to be beneficial. But again, just like we do with anything, right? We want to set expectations for collaboration. You're going to have students work together. You just want to remind them of what that would look like, or what that might sound like, what they should be doing, and maybe even what they should not be doing. You set the expectations on that. Okay. Here's another activity if you want to get some type of movement in students, if they maybe feel they've been sitting around. It's called 4 corners. And what you do is you assign each corner some type of label or response. Sometimes with older students, we use it for discussion like, oh, this corner is for those of you that agree. This corner is for those of you that strongly agree. This corner behind me is for those of you that disagree. This corner is for those of you that strongly disagree. And then what you would do is you would give them a question, right? I think we should serve McDonald's at lunch in the school every day. Okay, and then the students agree with that, they all go to that corner. The students that strongly agree go to the corner. So they go to the corners. They're basically standing in the corner. If you do this particular type of discussion with students, then you would maybe want to talk to one of the students. Say, okay, those people in the agree corner, why did you guys agree with that? People in the disagree corner, why did you disagree with that? So give them an opportunity all to express their voice. You can do it with anything. You can give them their responses. It doesn't have to be the discussion type of question. It can be done in math. It could be, you can give them a problem and maybe like, okay, I'm gonna give you a word problem. And those of you that think you can solve this with multiplication, over here. Those of you think we should solve it with division, over there. Those of you think we should solve it with addition, over here. Those of you think we should solve it with subtraction, over there. Then they go to their corners. And then you could say, oh, you said we could solve it with multiplication. How would you do it with multiplication? You said you can solve it with division. How would you do it with division, right? So it's just a way to create movement and to also always spur some type of discussion, because it gives you a chance to ask students what their thinking is. And one of the things with the shifts that we made in the standards, as you have heard about Common Core, California standards, is we emphasize student evidence. We emphasize students telling us what they know, not only what they know, but how they know it and why they know it. And so this one that kind of gives that opportunity for that. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, graphic organizers. This one is, you need to click one more, and then I think it'll come up. There you go. The graphic organizers are simply something you've heard about before, but really graphic organizers are used to solidify thinking and to help students express thinking, right? Let me go through them, and if you haven't heard the term graphic organizer, when I go through, it's going to make more sense to you. You can do a the reason why I pulled these graphic organizers is because these are things you can do without prep. Like, you don't have to have something copied off to do this. If you're going to use a 2-column, all you need to do is take a piece of paper and fold it in half. Now you have 2 columns, right? So you fold it. I remember when I was teaching, we used to call it the hot dog method, right? So it'd be folded long ways, like a hot dog, right? So you can do that. So you make it 2 columns, and then you can do it to compare things. You can have column A, column B, right? So we're going to take a look at birds, and we're going to say, we're going to take a look at, on this column, we're going to take a look at pigeons. And on this column, we're going to take a look at crows, and then they can give you all the information about it, right? So it's a way to compare 2 things. You can use it if they're working with multiple sources. If they're working from, maybe they read something the day before, or they're reading one article. Sometimes we do that with students with informational text. They might have one article about whales, and then they have another article about whales, right? So they're working with 2 articles, and you want them to get information about both those articles. You can make a 2-column notes, and then what they can do is, on one column, they can put about the first source that they read about whales. Let's say they read a book about, like a fiction book about whales. The other one they can write about an information text about whales. So you can use that one. The 3-column note is exactly like the 2-column, except we're using 3 columns. So instead of, that's a little bit harder for students to do, but you can show them how to make that 3-fold. They can do the same thing. And you use the 3-column note. You can use that one if they're reading a story and you want them to talk about who was in the story, what did they do, why did they do it, right? And again, what you're doing is you're helping students with their thinking. So especially when we're reading stories about characters, sometimes they get confused about the characters. They can put who the character is, what was the character do, and you can give them a prompt for that. So we watched 3 videos, right? And I could have you do with the 3-column note. I could say, okay, who was the teacher in each of those videos? What did they do as far as, what did you see them do? What was one thing you saw them do as far as classroom management was concerned? And then why did you think that they did that? Or why do you feel that that's effective? Do you understand? So you can do that too. The 3rd graphic organizer, you probably have seen it before. We sometimes call it a bubble map or circle map. And it really is used to identify and or describe, but it's really used to kind of have students talk about characteristics about a particular topic. All right. And the last one, the Freyer model, is used mainly for definition, but it's like a 4-square. And I'm gonna kind of go through a little bit. So Dr. Marchesso, if you click again, I think one of them is going to come up. That's the 2-column note, just so you can kind of take a look at it. And here's some examples how you might be able to use it, right? These are not all one. These are kind of different ways you can use it. So 3 ways, and then on the second side, they can put what those 3 ways are. They can put a vocabulary word and then a definition on the other side. They could put a question and then what the answer is. For math, they can put, here's the formula, and then here's the examples. This is ways that you can do. Again, you can do this very easily. You don't need to make copies of anything. You can just have the students do that. If you go into a classroom, they talk about Cornell notes. This Cornell notes uses a 2-column similar to this, a little bit different, but that's kind of what they're doing, a similar type of thing. They're asking students to put some type of question or statement on the left side, and then an answer or response on the right side. Okay, click again. This is a 3-column, right? Again, this is what a 3-column will look like. And here's some examples of how you can use it. You can put the topic and explanation and then some of the details in that third one. Again, vocabulary is another one that you can use. Let's say you go in and the teacher says, oh, the students need to work on their vocabulary. And you're like, okay, great. Here, you guys, why don't you do this? Let's make a 3-column. I'm gonna have you put the vocabulary on one, put the definition in the middle, and then use it in the sentence in the third one, right? So, but it helps students a little bit easier to work with through that. Okay, let's hit that again. Here is the bubble map. It's easier to explain when you can see it. So in the middle of the bubble map or circle map, you put down whatever it is, the topic or item that you want to talk about or have the students talk about, and then they create outlining bubbles or circles that go with the characteristics about it. Okay, and this can expand as much as you want to, right? They can end up adding corresponding circles to some of the outside circles. It can go a little bigger and bigger. But again, this is an easy one to again have the students do. They can start out by making a circle in the middle of their paper and then put the topic, and then they can start making those circles out there. All right, okay, let's hit again. This is what the Freyer model looks like. Sometimes people call it a 4-square, no, because you can do it that way. Again, you don't need this template. You can just take a piece of paper and fold it in 4, right? And then in the middle, you put down the word. This is often used for vocabulary. You can put down the word, and then as you can see here, in one corner, you can put what the definition is in their own words. In fact, and we'll talk a little bit about it later on, but best way for doing vocabulary is for students to write what their understanding of it is, not just copy a definition. And then there can be some characteristics about it, and then examples and non-examples. And the examples and non-examples are always good because we need to think about what it is, but also think about what it's not. Like when we were talking to you guys about classroom management, some of the things that we talked about was what it's not, right? Because sometimes when we talk about what something isn't, it helps us understand what it is. So the Freyer model does that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I started talking with the Freyer model about vocabulary, right? And this is for your own thing. Again, if you go into a classroom and there's a lesson plan there, the teacher might ask the students to take a definition from the book and write it down, or definition from the back of a book, or just from the dictionary. I'm just letting you guys know, when we talk about effective vocabulary strategies, the most effective is when students can put things in their own word and they're not just copying something. And the reason for that is I can copy a definition from a language I don't know, as long as the characters, I know how to make the characters. I can copy, so it doesn't mean I know what the definition is, right? If I was learning German and I was copying a definition about a German word, I can copy it, but it doesn't mean I'm learning it. So it's the ability for students to put something in their own words, helps them to understand better what it is that the word means. So the first one is one that if you were working long-term sub, again, it's not going to be the quick one, but this is more of a long-term. It's called code. And what you do is you help students to make connections with the words that they're already doing. How do those words fit together with the vocabulary? How do they fit with something else they know? How can they organize those vocabulary words under categories maybe? So they maybe come up with the categories themselves on like, oh, we're organizing these under, these are how someone eats. This is how someone does this. So they can organize them. And then you get into what we call deep understanding, which is the ability to work with those words, not just give a definition, but to work with the words, come up with their own meaning about what the word is, And for this one, and we have a couple that actually do the same thing, for this one, they can draw the word or draw what the word means. And then if you really want students to learn vocabulary, they need to work with it every now and then, again and again. It's not just I learned that word first week of the school year, and now we never talk about it again. So we want to make sure that we are ending up going back and having them work with the words, so that the more they work with them, the more it becomes part of who they are. You know that from any type of vocabulary that you've learned, the more that you use words, the more that you use that particular vocabulary, the more you understand it, how it's supposed to be used, and you're able to use that in a positive way. The next is called Marzano's 6-step vocabulary strategy. You can do this with students. Even if there is a plan there and the teacher wants it to do some definitions, but didn't really outline how it's supposed to be done, and you're not really sure. And instead of asking the student, you come, hey, maybe I'll use the Marzano 6-step, which is what you do is you provide a definition for them. You tell them, okay, here's your vocabulary word, here's what it means. And then they put in their own words, what it means. And then after they do that, they draw a picture of it. Right? Those are the first 3 steps students do. The next 3 steps is what the teacher does to kind of keep them involved in, just like the code. You know, we work with it periodically, we play games with it, all that kind of stuff. But if you're a substitute teacher, you can do the first 3, which is give them a definition, tell them what it means, have them write down in their own words what it means, and then draw a picture. Now, drawing a picture is why are we having the kids draw a picture? We call it a non-linguistic representation. Why are we having them draw a picture? Because kids are going to say, I can't draw. But think about this. If you need to draw a picture of something, you need to know what it is. Now, especially when you're talking about abstract things. Like, if I asked you to draw a picture of love, what would you draw? Right? If I asked you to draw a picture about freedom, what would you draw? It doesn't really matter what you draw, right? It doesn't matter that your drawing is different from somebody else's, but what matters is what research has shown, and the reason why this is effective is because when a student goes to remember that definition, guess what's going to pop into their head? The picture that they drew. So the picture will be the reminder to them of what that word is. So the picture is really a good thing to do. And again, you might have students say, I can't draw, right? You say, it's okay. This is not an art class. No one's going to be judging your drawing. If you want to draw stick figures, that's okay, right? No one's going to say whether or not your art is good, and tell them the reason why this is really good for your brain when you draw a picture of the word that you're working with. We already talked about the Freyer model. The last one is word walls. If you get into your own classroom or you're working as a long-term sub, and you may hear someone say, oh, using word walls is really good, and it is good. And what usually with word walls is you put up words as you're learning vocabulary. You create a wall somewhere with the words that you guys have been working on. Some teachers put up all the words they're going to be working on, or that words they're going to be working on for that particular unit. They put those up already, put them up their word wall. Sometimes it's more effective to do it one at a time as they're coming up, or in groups as they're coming up. But here's what makes word walls most effective, and going back to that first one, code and Marzano's, what makes word walls most effective is when students interact with them. So I saw one teacher had a word wall, and what she would do is she would tell kids, anytime you hear this word or use this word outside the classroom, actually I think it was just hearing the word outside the classroom or seeing the word outside the classroom, the next day you come in and you put a Post-it next to the word. Because kids are now interacting with the word wall, and they're thinking about the words, right? They go, that's on our word wall, right? And they go the next day and they're excited about putting a Post-it next to, I heard this word yesterday, right? So they get a chance to rework with it, to interact with it, and it really makes it, helps them to get into a deeper understanding of the words, right? And make the words move into their long-term memory, and not just something that they learn one time for one test and then they're done. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Reading strategies. So of course, if you go in a classroom, students are going to have to read, right? And the question is, what do we do? How do we help out students when we have a reading assignment that they need to do? One thing I do want to mention here that we don't want to do is sometimes they call it popcorn reading, or where students are, or the next person reads, right? You start out, okay, you read the first paragraph, and then we'll just keep going down the row. The problem with that is number one, students may not be comfortable reading aloud, right? That's the first thing. They may struggle with that. And you could have a student that's really struggling to reading, and now it becomes uncomfortable for everybody because they're taking a really long time and no one's really getting anything out of that. What also happens is when students are told, okay, first you, then you, then you, then you, the kids are just waiting for their own paragraph to come up. And they're not really listening to what someone else says. And then once they're done with their paragraph, they kind of disengage. So we want to make sure, how do we keep students engaged, right? The first thing you can do, this is really good when you first start out with anything they're going to read. It's good, especially for textbooks. So I'm starting a new chapter in my textbook. Hey guys, I want you to do a read around the text. And what that means is I want you to just flip through the chapter, take a look at the main headings, take a look at the minor headings, take a look at anything that's bold, take a look at the pictures, take a look at the charts, take a look at anything that is on this particular one, right? We call that reading around the text. And the reason why that is good is because it helps set the stage for the brain, right? So they start to get a little bit of intro to what they're going to be reading before they're going to be reading. And students should always have an understanding of not only what they're reading, but why they're reading it. So read around the text kind of gives them some of that, right? Another strategy, if you're asked to have the students read a certain section and the teacher wants them to read it out loud, instead of doing that, you could have them read to. So I could say, all right, guys, I want you to read to page 3, right? And then stop. And then after they read to page 3, you can have a debrief and talk about, okay, what did you guys read? What did you think? Any of that kind of thing, right? You can, if it's depending on the class, you can have just read one paragraph. Okay, I want you to, by yourselves, read the next paragraph. And then they do, and then you go, okay, then you talk about it. That is good also, again, for students that are struggling readers for whatever reason, either because of language or because of some other difficulty, because maybe they don't get through the whole point. Maybe they're starting to read and they're not through the whole paragraph with the 3 pages, but they're going to hear the discussion about it. And so that's going to help them out. If you want students to read out loud, you can do choral reading, which is they read along with the teacher. The teacher leads the reading and they read out loud with the teacher as the teacher is reading. So again, it minimizes the stigma of reading without, you're able to read aloud without feeling like you're being singled out or worried about how your reading is. You could do reading buddies, which is, again, you pair up students and they take turns reading the paragraphs to each other. Now, you just said, hey, Dr. Cortez, you told me that that's not good to have students read aloud. Well, when you're only 2 people and there's a little bit more patience among the 2 people when they're doing that reading, and the other student often helps out the other one as they're doing the reading, right? But the reading buddies, they can do, again, it's a less threatening environment for them to read out loud because they're only reading to someone next to them. They're not reading to the whole class. So reading buddies can be a way to kind of do that. And again, in A-B, first person A reads and then person B, and they continue that through whatever section that they're reading. All right. And then, of course, teacher read aloud. Anytime you read to the students, it's a good thing. We think about that in the primary grades, right? We think about the teacher will read aloud to the students, but it's surprising it works for all students, no matter the age. It can work for middle school and secondary schools just as effectively. And the reason why it's effective is because students get a chance to hear good reading, right? They hear someone reading more fluently. It's not going to be, they're not struggling with the phonetic part, I guess I should say. They're not struggling with the decoding. And so they can listen to someone read. And then the teacher does the modeling, especially when it comes to thinking, right? So if they're reading, they can model what some of that good reading is, which we know good reading involves someone who stops and summarizes what they're reading, asks questions about the reading, try to make a connection with the reading that they're reading now and what they read before, and tries to predict what the reading is going to say or will be talking about. So you can read a paragraph and say, you know, that paragraph reminds me of this, right? It reminds me of something else. That reminds me of another story I read, or it reminds me of this thing that I saw, right? You're kind of telling them that's what good reading does. Reading, when you read something, you try to make a connection with something. Or you can read a couple of things and just say, okay, I'm going to stop here and think about what it is I just read, right? Because I want to make sure I'm understanding. So that good modeling will be beneficial for students. The last one, reading for meaning, and I think if you click, I think I have an example. Okay, reading for meaning is a strategy where you use the 3-column, here comes the 3-column back in, and there can be a couple ways that you can do it. In the middle, you write a statement. And then as students are reading, they collect evidence. Evidence that supports that statement or evidence that refutes or goes against that statement, right? So in this one, this example, the hare deceived the bear, right? So as they're reading, they're going to write, oh, let me see times that the hare did deceive the bear, or no, that's not true. The hare never deceived them. Let me give you evidence against that. You can do that way. So you can come up with some statements, or you can have them, let's say they're reading about, again, they're reading about whales, and you want them to really understand like where whales live, what whales eat, and how whales interact with people. Let's just say those 3 things. You can put that in the middle, right? You can put that in the middle, and then they can find some, on one column, the evidence for that statement, and the other one, instead of the third evidence against, it could be, where did they find it? Like what page did they find it on? What paragraph did they find it on? So again, so we're kind of getting them used to what they do as they move into the higher levels is citation, right? We're getting used to that. So you can do that also. All right. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right. The other thing often that we ask students to do is to summarize, right? And this is a difficult, sometimes task for students, a difficult skill for students. So this is a way to help them out. Again, if you walk into a classroom, you're there for a day, and on your lesson plan it says, have the kids read this and write a summary. And maybe the teacher does not talk about what kind of summary, how the summary is. And so you might say, hey, I'm going to maybe do one of these strategies to help these students out. Great. One is a 4-column. And so what you would do here, even though I put beginning, middle, end, sometimes the reason why the 4-column, honestly, is because it's easier for kids to make, right? Instead of a 3-column. Sometimes 3 columns can be a little bit confusing. But they can write, let's say they're working with a fictional text. And so on the first column, they write about something that happened in the beginning of that story. And then they can use the 2 middle ones to talk about the middle of the story. And then the last column to happen at the end, especially if you want them to talk about that certain section. So you guys just read 1 chapter in this. So talk about what happened at the beginning of that chapter, what was the middle about, what was going on in that chapter, and then how did that chapter end, right? Again, these again are graphic organizers, and we told you one of the reasons for a graphic organizer was to help out student thinking. So that's what we're trying to do. So you can do that. And again, it could be beginning, middle, end. It can be anything. You could use this for math, right? What's the problem? And then in the middle, the 2 middle columns are, there's one would be a strategy on how you're going to attack that. The other would be how you attack it. And then the end could be the solution, right? You'd be very creative with this, but this is kind of the general idea about how you do that. The next one is what we call 3-2-1. So you could have students summarize, like, what were the 3 main ideas from that section that you just read, right? What were 2 things that you thought were interesting? And what 1 question do you have now after you've read that, right? So the good thing about something like this is when students start to summarize, they don't really know how to do it. And it's not, you don't only want them to be retelling something, but you want to find out what their understanding is. And so if you ask them to do 3 main ideas, they have to discriminate a little bit. They have to think about, well, what do I think the 3 main ideas are? Because my 3 main ideas might be different than another student's 3 main ideas. And that's okay, right? Because that actually is great discussion. Like, hey, what did you put down for 3 main ideas? And this is a great place for a pair share. This is, in a sense, becomes a think right pair share, right? So they can do that and then talk to a partner about it. Like, hey, what did you put down for 3 main ideas? What were the 2 things you thought were interesting? What question did you have, right? And then when we do that, right, learning becomes not just something that is rote memorization, like, okay, this is what they told me, this, I'm giving this right back to you. But learning becomes something that becomes a little bit more transformative. We help students not only, they pick up their ideas, they share their ideas, we give them voice, right? Not just, you're not just repeating what I said, but you're thinking about the learning. So it's a good thing. The next one I put down there, which I think is kind of interesting, it's called a $2 summary, right? And so what you tell us, and this is another one, it's another one to make students think about what it is that they're writing. And anytime, again, they have to think about it and figure out what they want to put in is good for their understanding of the concept. So what you do is you say, all right, guys, I want you to write a $2 summary. And remember, each word is worth 10 cents. It can be 5 cents, it doesn't matter. Each word is worth a penny, it doesn't matter. You want to make sure, you want to give them a value to it. Each word is worth 10 cents. Now, what I want you to do is you're going to write a summary, but you only have $2. So you can only write this many words with $2. You cannot spend more than $2. So it's kind of a way to, again, get them to discriminate. And depending on what you're asking the summary, this is probably be like 2 sentences, which is okay. Maybe you might want to make the value of the words less so they can have more words, or the value of the summary itself more, right? How great it would be if you had this, you were doing, let's say, long-term subbing, and you had them do $2 summaries, and then you say, you know what? Today we're going to write a $5 summary, right? They're like, oh my God, yeah, we're going to do a $5. I'm saying you have $5 to spend, right? I need you to spend all of it or most all of it. You have to spend more than $4.50, you know, but that'd be great. You know, it's like, then you start challenging students. That'd be really good to do. The last one I put on here is what we call a vocabulary summary. And there are 2 ways of doing this. One is you can just give the kids a list of vocabulary words and just say, okay, you need to use all these vocabulary words in your summary. That's fine. But if you want to help out students, again, that have difficulty with summarizing, especially students that struggle with processing, even your ELL students, what you do is you give them the list of vocabulary words, but the order that those words come in. So I say, okay, here are the 10 vocabulary words you need for this summary, and you have to use them in this order, right? And the reason why that is more effective is because it helps students to remember, right? It's like, I'm writing something about George Washington, and it says, you know, grew up in this area. So like, let's say you put one of the vocabulary words is Virginia, or, you know, or cherry tree, or whatever it is. So they go, oh, first I talk about this, and I talk about this, and I talk about this. You're kind of leading them in the direction they should be talking. So it seems restrictive, but it actually is easier for students. So these are 4 good strategies that you can use for that. Okay. All right, let's move on. All right, writing strategy.
I'm so sorry, Dr. Cortez. I do want to pause for a second because I noticed that Jay has their hand raised and had a question.
Okay, all right, great, yeah. Question?
Yeah, so like hair, what that means, H-A-R-E.
Oh, that's a rabbit. That's another word for a rabbit.
Oh, rabbit. Okay.
Yeah, that's another word for a rabbit. That you might have heard, you know, in stories that we have, the hare and the tortoise, right? Is probably the more popular one. So it's another term for a rabbit.
Which story you said it's popular?
The tortoise and the hare. I said the hare. The tortoise and the hare, about the turtle and the rabbit and the race, and the one goes fast, the one goes slow, and the rabbit thinks he's going to win the race because he's so fast, and the turtle ends up beating him because the rabbit makes mistakes along the race.
Oh,
That's a real popular kid story. Yeah, used to be anyway. I don't know. It still is.
I have a lot to learn. That's why subbing is very important.
It helps out when you get the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions before I kind of move on? I've given you a lot of information right now.
Dr. Cortez, I don't know if
Yes.
I missed it, but the 4-column strategy,
Yes.
if there's a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, and you're wondering where's the 4-column come in?
Yeah.
What happens is the middle is 2 columns.
Oh, okay, I got it. Thank you very much.
Use the middle for 2 columns. And again, the reason for doing the 4-column in that particular reason is just, again, it's easier for students to make 4 columns than it is to make 3 columns, right? I mean, it's easier to tell kids, okay, fold the paper one time, right, hot dog wise, and then fold it again. Now you have 4 columns. That's easy to do. When you make a 3-column, you have to say, okay, bring the one paper in, and then the other paper in, and then sometimes that's a little bit more difficult for students. So I'm just saying, if you don't have a template, you're not like, hey, make copies of this. So you're kind of trying these are things that you can do in the moment, right? I can very easily tell students, all right, look, take a piece of paper, fold it in half, and then fold it again, and then they can use that, right? And so that it's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, and then for the reading strategies, it's evidence for statement, and what's the 3rd column?
So again, it would be, you're talking about the reading for meaning. It was evidence for. The middle column was the statement, and then the last column was evidence against.
Oh, evidence against. This is the first time you guys are doing this workshop?
Yes.
Oh, that's nice. You guys are thinking to do more of this workshop?
Well, we're always open to it, so we'll see what what they want us to do and how we want that to go.
That's awesome.
All right, let me talk to you about 2 writing strategies. All right. Again, there are lots of strategies out there. What we did was just pull some that you could use if you needed to, and that are effective for students. The first is called a raft. And the reason why it's called a raft, you can see there, it's role, audience, format, and topic. And there on the left, you can see an example of what that looks like. Basically, what you're doing is you're asking students to take a role, and then you tell them, here's the audience you're writing to, here's the format you're going to write, and then here's the topic. And if you can see on the right-hand side, I give you some examples. So obviously they're talking about Red, which is the book that whatever class is reading about. And this is the Little Red Riding Hood, right? So you can be Red, and their audience is the police. So you're writing to the police, and the format you're going to do is a deposition, right? And then you're going to talk about what really happened. So you're telling the kids, okay, for this one, you're going to be Red. You're going to write, writing to the police about what really happened. You could be Grandma, and you're writing to Red, and you're just having a conversation with her about not talking to strangers. All right. You can be the Wolf, and you're writing to your audience is your defense attorney, and you're doing a conversation with them about that you were framed. Do you understand? So really what they're doing is they're writing about the story, Little Red Riding Hood, but they're taking roles on how they do it. And this can be, you can go online and look for raft writing examples, and they'll give you a bunch of different ones. It can be used for science, it can be used for math, it can be used for any subject. You can just give them a role. That sometimes it could be, the format could be, you're gonna write a letter, you're gonna make a speech, you're gonna do a newspaper article. But what we have found is when students are given this type of format to write, they're more engaged in the writing. And one of the reasons why is because sometimes students struggle on how they should be writing, especially when we start moving in with older students. And so this kind of gives them direction. It kind of sets the purpose on what they're doing. And really with writing, everybody writes for a reason. No one writes for no reason. There's always a reason why you're writing. And that's where students struggle the most, is when they get down to writing a paragraph, writing an essay. It's like, why? They don't think about why they're writing. And so the raft strategy gives them, here's who you're writing to, and here's why you're writing. And then they step out a little bit from themselves. They don't worry so much about what they sound like because they're writing from someone else's perspective. But while they're doing that, what they're doing is they're getting an opportunity to summarize or work with whatever topic that is. When we do help out students who are with writing, we do this especially in the primary grades, intermediate, but this can also be in middle school, even reminders for kids in high school. We use what's called the hamburger model. Sometimes you might hear it, and just let you know, sometimes they talk about a Jane Schaefer model. Some schools use that, but we use a hamburger writing. You can see the picture there. The bun is the topic sentence, and then the things inside are the supporting detail, and then the bottom bun is the conclusion sentence. So just kind of, it's a good reminder for students on how they should be writing a paragraph, right? You always have some type of topic sentence that leads this in. And then what are the supporting details? What is it that you just wrote a topic sentence? You just said, whales are the most interesting, mammal in the sea. Okay, great. You just made a sentence. You just made a topic sentence. Now you have to give me supporting detail. Why is that true? You just made this sentence. Why is that true? And then after that, you give me a conclusion. And so you can see it talks here about, supporting sentence or supporting detail 1, supporting detail 2, supporting detail 3. So, and this helps students understand how a paragraph is put together. All right. So these are 2 quick writing strategies that kind of help us to understand about how to work with students. All right. Okay, let's move to the next one.
If I can just add quickly,
Yeah,
I know
definitely,
the next slide is checking for understanding. I just want to point out that the reason we're focusing on talking, reading, and writing is this is how learners of all ages process information. And so that's why we really wanted to focus on these strategies, is because these are all ways that our students and our learners can process what it is they're learning in a variety of ways. Some of our students need to talk about it. Some of our students need that quiet time to write about it. To get that information is through the reading. So you want to really make sure in the classroom that you are bringing all of these types of strategies into the lesson so that the different learners have different opportunities to process in the way that works best for them.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Now, when we're working with students, what we want to do is we want to take some time to, all right, how well is the lesson going, right? Or we need to check for some type of understanding. We need to think about how the students are taking it, right? Because we can have the best lesson, but if the students really aren't taking it, the students aren't understanding, it's all for naught. So we want to make sure that we are, that we have plenty of ways for us to check for that. And so here are some ways that you can check for understanding. You might have heard about this first one, exit tickets. And exit tickets basically are what they sound like. At the end of a lesson, you ask students, they can do it on a postcard, on an index card, a piece of paper, something where you have them write an exit ticket on some type of prompt at the end of the lesson. Like, all right, give me the summary about what it is that you learned today. We were talking about this, right? You can ask them a question if it's like math. Okay, we're working on adding 2-digit numbers, right? I'm gonna put one on the board. I want you to solve that on your exit ticket. You can do that. But this is something that you're kind of checking with all the students. One of the ways that sometimes we check for understanding is we could say, okay, does anyone have any questions? Okay, people may have questions, but they may not say it. So that doesn't help out. Or a couple people might ask questions. Or I can ask a question and have a couple people respond to it, a couple of students. That doesn't mean everyone knows it. It means those two people that responded know it. But you want to have some type of strategy that checks with all students, checks in on all students. So the exit ticket one, and you could, this is where also you could use that 3-2-1 that I told you. You can do the exit tickets. Okay, 3 things that you learned today, 2 things you found interesting, 1 question you have. You could do that also. The muddiest point and the hand signals are a similar type of thing. In fact, we saw on the video with the teacher that did the expectations, she was doing it at the end. I don't know if you saw it, she had cups, right? And they were different colors. And she said, okay, this is gonna tell you if you need help, right? So kids will put out the yellow cup. If they don't need help, they can put out the green cup. If they need teacher to stop, they can put out the red cup. So it's a way to kind of help the teacher to gauge where students are. And you can do the same thing with the muddiest point. You can have students write down like, okay, so write down what is clear, or at the top of your paper, or circle what you find is the muddiest point, you know, things that is difficult for you to understand because it's not really clear. And then you can kind of, when you collect those papers, take a look at, oh, they're not understanding this, this, and that, because that's what that person's doing. This is a low stakes thing for the student. You can also do it if you want to kind of do a quick check of the room. You can have them use hand signals, or you could, if they have cards or you bring cards with you, similar type of thing. Okay, if you're understanding what I'm talking about, put up a green card. If you're kind of understanding, but you're not really 100% sure, put up a yellow card. If you really don't really understand what we're talking about, put up a red card, right? And everyone can do that. You can kind of take a quick look and say, oh, look, oh, they're all getting it, right? You can do that. You can do the same thing with hand signals. You could say, okay, thumbs up if you understand it, thumbs sideways if you're not really sure, thumbs down if you don't understand it, right? Again, you don't need anything to do that. That's a quick thing for you to do, but you can kind of check to see. So you can do that after you give out directions. Let's say you gave out your expectations, you gave out the direction what the kids should be doing, and go, all right, thumbs up if you understand what it is you think you understand what you should be doing right now. Off to the side if you're not really sure what you should be doing right now, and put a thumbs down if you really aren't sure what you should be doing right now, right? So I can help explain that. And let's say you do that and you have a bunch of kids do this, you're like, okay, let me re-explain, right? So that could do it. If the class has whiteboards, you could have, some of them have individual whiteboards. Some classes do, not all classes do, but some classes have individual whiteboards. And students could take out the whiteboard and they could answer the question on the whiteboard and then hold it up. So let's say you're doing math and you give them a problem, and you say, okay, do the problem. They do it on the whiteboard and they hold it up, and you can do a scan to see if how many people got the correct answer, or it could be answer yes, answer no, whatever that is. But that gives you a quick scan of what is going on in the classroom, okay? And then the next one is what we call KWL. Some of you are familiar with that. What you do start out, begin a lesson. All right, what do we want to know about, what do we already know about this particular topic? So we're talking about whales. What do you guys already know about whales, right? So you kind of ask them, and they'll tell you about what they already know. Great, let's write that down. What do we want to know about whales? And then we write that down. And then the last part, that L, is after they've done the reading, after they've worked with the article, whatever it's going to do. All right, what did you learn about whales, right? And some people add that last one in, the E, which is what evidence did you use to learn about that, or where did you find that information? So some of it is providing the evidence. So some people add in that last E, so it's a KWLE. But that's also an effective way of at the end, that L kind of checks for understanding what the kids get. The last one I put on there is a handprint. And what you do is you have the students actually draw their hand on a piece of paper, and then on each finger, they put down what would be one of the main points of what it is that they were talking about. And then in their palm, they could write a summary, right, of it. So, and then they turn that into you. So you get a chance to take a look at that. So these are all ways for you to kind of see how the lesson is going and how the students are learning the lesson. All right. So we talked about the jigsaw, right? Remember the jigsaw on ways to help out students break up information. We talked about different graphic organizers, 2-column, 3-column. We talked about the Freyer model. We talked about the circle or bubble map. We talked about reading strategies and way to do reading. The read around the text, the read to, choral reading, teacher reading, reading buddies. We talked about that. And we talked about 4 corners on a way for building discussion. So these are just some of the instructional strategies that you can use as you are working through and kind of getting ready for, or to have something ready when you walk into a subclass, just in case maybe the lesson plans aren't really, maybe they're very, very general, and instead of you kind of want to add some things to it to kind of help augment it and supplement it, that might be very useful. All right. Okay, we're going to take another break before we move on to our next section. So we'll do the same thing. We're kind of inching our breaks down a little bit. We're going to take a 6-minute break. So it's 11:21. We'll be back at 11:27 and move on to our next topic. All right, see you guys then.
All right, sorry. Too many buttons I was pushing at the same time. Thank you, Dr. Cortez. So now we're going to get into differentiation strategies and legal requirements for being in the classroom. We do want to make sure you have a little time to get into the lesson planning before we have Miss Lee from Pasadena Unified join us. So I may go through these a little quickly. I apologize, but it's, just keeping an eye on the time and making sure that we stay on schedule. So when you enter the classroom, you're going to have a variety of learners sitting in front of you, especially in California. And so before we start talking about differentiation, I want to share with you this video of a student who's an English learner and his perspective of the lesson in math class and how he sees it through his eyes.
We have testing all week this week and next week. The tests are going to be hard, but that's all right because we're going to try really hard. Isn't that right, Cameron?
Yes, Miss Peters.
Okay, great. Everyone listen up. So we're going to want to work all week at ours from the answer and the information in the story, okay? We're going to go ahead and test, factual test, and try this actus test. Oh, test your test up. We're going to page, you go to B. First on page 3.
Is the video?
¿Qué dijo? ¿A poco va a empezar el examen? No, es una práctica.
We're going to take notes from the story and we're going to turn it into a math problem and we're going to walk through it together, okay? So the boy ran 3 blocks. So everyone write 3 blocks.
I didn't even know. He looked like a stranger.
How long did it take him to run 3 blocks? Michelle?
6 minutes.
Very good, 6 minutes. All right, so then we take 3 blocks and 6 minutes,
¿Por qué el
right?
niño corre con los bloques? ¿Qué? Sí, ¿por qué el niño corre con los bloques?
No, okay, so corre 3 calles. Go on to ask us, how long will it take him to run 20 blocks? What do we do? How many minutes is that per block?
8 minutes.
Try and remember to raise your hand if you want to answer, okay? No, it's not 8 minutes. Michelle?
18 minutes?
Nope, not 18 minutes. Yes, Enrique?
40?
40, yeah, very good. How'd you get 40?
I don't know.
You don't know? Well, 40 is the right answer. How did you get it?
I forgot.
You forgot. Okay. Does anyone know how we get 40? Yes, Moises.
40.
Yep, that's right. Very good. Great. Can you tell us how you got that?
40.
Yep, very good. But can you explain to the class what you did here, how you got that?
40.
Okay, all right, you guys, settle down.
That is so dumb.
Joe, do you want to lose your recess?
No.
Okay, then. Thank you, Moises.
Can you help me, please?
Can you take a walk with me? I don't want you to worry about the test, okay, Moises?
Sí, estoy preocupada sobre el examen. La directora Rosa dijo que todavía tenemos que hacer.
Just try your best, okay? Do you understand? Not importante.
Sí, sí es importante.
You're right, Moises. It is important.
So one thing I want to point out from that video is that Moises had difficulty understanding the language, but he didn't have difficulty understanding the math. And oftentimes when we are supporting our students who are English language learners, it's important to remember that we really need to remind ourselves, is the focus of the lesson the building of the English language, or can that lesson be taught through a vehicle that best supports that student's language development? So some ways that you can support English language learners in the classroom are to use sentence starters, using pictures and visuals. You could see clearly just handing words to an individual in English who is learning the language of English at the same time can be very confusing for them. There's a lot of words we use in English that have multiple meanings. And so it's really key for teachers and substitutes to identify those words ahead of time and to pre-think about what those multiple meanings might be, and rephrasing our statements so that we are explaining what we want students to do in a variety of ways. For example, I'm in charge of science in Pasadena. We just gave a science assessment, and I was looking through some of the responses of students, and in second grade, they're studying matter. And one of the questions asked students to explain what matter was. And in science, we're looking for anything that has mass and takes up space. And I had a handful of students in their responses say that matter is when something means a lot to you. For example, if you have a new toy that matters to you, and then if someone breaks it, that really matters. And so I could see how that word, it was being used in a variety of content areas, and they weren't sure of the science definition, but they were pulling in their learning from ELA and using that to define matter. Graphic organizers, all those graphic organizers that Dr. Cortez shared with you, are very helpful in supporting English language learners in developing vocabulary. As he mentioned, and I want to bring up again, is it's very important that the vocabulary is taught in context. So there was a time when, and particularly in content areas such as math and science, we were encouraged to front load all vocabulary. And for our English language learners, just as Dr. Cortez said, I can write a definition in Spanish, I can write a definition in German, but if I'm not using that word and that definition in context to my learning, then it's not going to stick in my brain. It's my brain is going to filter that out as not being important to me at that moment in time. And so we want to make sure that when we're introducing vocabulary for our English language learners, that we're doing it in context, or when we are engaging in a concrete example of what that word means. When we are working with our students with disabilities, There is a framework called Universal Design for Learning, and they have 3 areas in which you can support your students with disabilities. And so this is a good time to point out, like when we talk about the average student, we have to remind ourselves how we find average. So we find average by placing something on a scale and then adding all that up, and right in the middle is that average. So no learner, if we talk about height, if we talk about body temperature, which has been popular right now because of COVID, like very few people actually hit and are consistently that 98.6 degrees. That's an average of body temperatures after looking at a variety of different temperatures. I know, for example, myself, I fall in the 97.6 degree category. So my body temperature runs a little lower than the average. And because we have a variety of students in our classroom and a variety of students who learn differently, and then you have our exceptional students, who we have some of those that might have disabilities in their learning, and we have our GATE students on the other side, and you can even have your GATE students who also might have some learning disabilities, and those are called twice exceptional. We need to make sure we're bringing in a variety of strategies that can support our students in learning the content. So this framework, which is from Universal Design for Learning, or UDL for short, this identifies how we can do that for our students. So providing multiple means of engagement. If we don't engage students in their learning, if we don't, in the forefront of the lesson, tell them why it is important to learn this, then it might not stick into their long-term memory. If we can't answer their why, then there's no guarantee they're going to learn it. You are all here because you are interested in becoming a substitute. So already what we're providing you is relevant, and you are engaged, and you're asking questions, and you're paying attention because you want to be here. Well, we need to engage our students in the same way and make sure that they understand why it is important what they're learning. And it can't be just because I said so, or because the standard said I need to. But how is this going to relate to their everyday life? So we want to make sure that we recruit their interest, that we provide options. The more we can provide voice and choice in the classroom, which is really what UDL is about, and use a variety of ways of teaching that content, the more engaged our students are going to be, and the more likely that learning is going to go into their long-term memory. And if you Google UDL, I know this graphic, probably because I made it too big, is kind of hard to read. You can find this very easily. Okay. So when we talk about supporting students with disabilities, there's 2 key pieces, that is modifications and accommodations. And so when you are working with students with disabilities, a lot of times they come with a document called an individualized education plan, or an IEP. And this IEP is developed after many meetings with the parents and the teachers and the administrators, after lots of testing has been done to really pinpoint a student's areas of growth and what modifications and accommodations can be used to support that student. So I do want to share this video, because even if you go in for a day, the teacher might make a note on ways that an assignment needs to be modified, or accommodations that you're going to be making for individual students. And so this really explains the difference between the 2 and how they are utilized in the classroom.
She will help row the boat.
For students with disabilities, the right accommodations and modifications can be as important to school success as appropriate IEP goals. These educational supports are similar, but they are not the same. Accommodations change how a student accesses information, participates in school activities, or demonstrates their learning. They do not change the curriculum. Modifications, however, change what is being taught or what a student is expected to learn and demonstrate.
I only need you to do the circled problems for me.
Accommodations can be made by adjusting the amount of work a student must complete, allowing extra time.
Just go ahead and turn your paper in. Okay, you can go ahead and keep working. You've got about 5 more minutes.
Adapting assignments.
Alex, I have your shapes here. Good.
Providing extra assistance, or changing the physical setting.
Let's do one more page today.
There is no one set list. Because each child is unique, the IEP team must identify specific strategies to help your child succeed. For example, presenting a few math problems at a time may help a student who is easily overwhelmed. Another student might benefit from short breaks, or being allowed to finish an assignment at home. A student who has difficulty writing may be allowed the use of a computer, while students with a print disability may benefit from having tests read aloud.
They went downtown.
A child can be given an appropriate role when working in small groups,
Where am I?
or be allowed to participate in an activity in a different way.
Beware of what? Excuse me?
Being seated near the teacher helps some students stay focused,
So we'll go ahead and discuss these in a minute.
and assistive technology can support a wide range of needs.
And if you need me, you can raise your hand and I'll come and help you. All right?
In addition to accommodations, it is sometimes necessary to modify the curriculum. For example, when the class is learning how to tell time, one child might be expected to identify only the hours. While the class is working on vocabulary and spelling, another child may work from a shorter list, or focus exclusively on the meaning of key words.
Insects with 8 legs.
Parents play a vital role in crafting the IEP. After all, no one knows your child better. So at home, watch for what works, and any struggle.
All right, for sake of time, because I really do want to get you to breakout rooms to start thinking about your place in the classroom as you step into it. I'm going to pause the video here, but since you will be provided, or we're going to do our best to send out the link to the presentation to everybody. All of these videos are embedded and will be included in that, and so you can always come back and review the rest. But really just wanted to talk about the differences between accommodations and modifications. One thing about providing these for students is that it's non-negotiable. So if the student has an IEP, if you're a long-term sub, you might have access to that IEP. You'll know exactly what modifications and accommodations are needed. You have to follow those. If you are in the classroom for a day and the teacher says that, that a student is able to go to a different classroom to take the test, you must follow that. Again, these are not non-negotiables where you think, oh no, they're fine, or they can stay in the room. I'm not going to give them that offering. Make sure you do that and you follow whatever accommodations the teacher has set forth in the lesson plan for these students. Okay. Sometimes also when working with students with disabilities, you will have paraprofessionals in the classroom. These individuals are also called instructional aides or teacher assistants. They usually provide support for instruction, behavior. At one point when I was in the classroom, I had a bilingual aide. So she provided language development support to students. Some work one-on-one with students, while others support small group or the entire class. It really just depends on the district, and then also some students have in their IEP written that they have the support of a one-on-one aide. So if that's the case, then that individual's sole responsibility is that one student that they are assigned to. They're not there to support the entire class or all the students in the classroom. If there's a classroom with a large number of students with disabilities, then an aide might be assigned to help support that classroom. They don't have the same training as teachers, so they're not certificated teachers, but they are required by law to meet certain qualifications. So they may, those qualifications are a bachelor's degree. They do have some training. They need to have training in certain areas they're supporting. But the reason I put this here is paraprofessionals should not be left with the responsibility of the classroom without a certificated teacher in the room. So when you guys become substitutes, you will become that certificated teacher. So make sure you don't leave them alone in the room to manage the students, because if something happens in that classroom while you have stepped out, you can be held legally responsible for that. Okay. So if we talk about our GATE students, GATE stands for Gifted and Talented Education. Back in my day, it was talented and gifted, but these are your students who, again, they do have special needs because their brain works a little differently than their peers. So some common characteristics is that they're able to comprehend material several grade levels above their age peers. They have surprisingly emotional depth and sensitivity as a young age. They have a strong sense of curiosity. They're enthusiastic about unique interests and topics, and will probably talk your ear off about it. They might have a more mature sense of humor, a more mature sense of humor than their peers. They are able to engage in creative problem solving. They absorb information quickly with few repetitions needed. And they might be more globally aware or socially aware of issues that they're encountering. So on the right-hand side is a graphic that I borrowed from the individual who's in charge of gifted and talented education for our district. And so she always talks about one way that you can really engage your gifted students to that next level, if maybe they finish the assignment early, or they're ready to add to something that they've been doing. So these are some ways that you can quickly and easily continue to engage them in the learning so that they don't get bored. So you can ask them to add to something they've just done, or substitute. Maybe if they're doing a math problem and you ask them to substitute numbers, or you want to see if they can substitute fractions for decimals. Can they combine things together to make something new? They can minimize or maximize what they're engaging with, or rearrange. So maybe if they're writing a story, I'm going out of my comfort zone here. I'm a science person, so I'm going out of my comfort zone here, and I'm going to focus on literacy. But if they're writing a story and maybe you want them to add to it an alternate ending. So they finish their story and you're like, that's great, looks great. Can you add to it an alternate ending? How else could the story end? Or can you substitute the characters and maybe make it from an animal perspective? I'm completely just off the top of my head here thinking through this. Can you combine like terms? And if it's in math, can you gave a large summary that's 3 paragraphs. Can you minimize that to 1 paragraph and get the same idea? So these are different ways that you can really just engage that creative and critical thinking for your students who are gifted, so that they stay engaged in the lesson. Okay. So for example, along with supporting all of our variety of students is something called divergent thinking, which is the idea that there are multiple ways to come to a solution, okay? That there's no right answer. So when you look at this picture, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about, when you see this picture, what could you turn it into? And I'm going to ask you to flood the chat with your ideas. So think about it, type your answer in the chat, but don't hit send until I say go. So for flood the chat, we all hit enter at the same time and all of our responses come up at once. but take a moment to think about it. And in 30 seconds, I'm going to say go, and you're going to flood the chat with your responses. All right, I'm going to say go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's flood the chat. Just connect the two ends, the rest of the dog's face, salad tongs, monster about to eat something, attached chopsticks, person laying on their back with a tie on. These are all great. So we see how everyone sees something different in this picture. A sideways conductor leading an orchestra. So I've done this at a couple different trainings, and I've seen light bulbs come out of it. Lots of animals, cats have come out of it. So here's another example. I wish I could say I drew this. I don't have an animal mouth. Yep. I don't have the best artistic ability, but here's another example. You can see the original picture here. Someone turned it into a monster and then added a person who has a new friend. Okay, so the more we can really create opportunities for students to, the monster is sweet, or he doesn't look sweet, but apparently he is because he's letting his nose get pet. The more we can really provide opportunities for students to think in different ways and to be unique in what they decide something becomes is a great way to support all of our learners and a great way to differentiate, whether it's our English learners, our students with disabilities, or our GATE learners. They all come to the table with very different experiences. They all come to the table with very different ways of thinking about things. So when we provide them opportunities to share their thinking in a way that's not just right or wrong, we really get to know our students, and we really get to know their strengths. And it allows them to feel like they are included into the classroom environment in a safe way. All right, real quick, let's get into the legal requirements. This is never the fun part of talking about becoming a teacher, but it's necessary because as substitute teachers, you have the legal responsibility to protect the students in your classroom. So probably the most important of that is being a mandated reporter. So whenever we suspect that a child is being abused, whether that's physical injury, it can be sexual abuse or sexual exploitation of a child. It could be neglect or maltreatment, or if we know that the house that they are living in, that they are endangered, their endangerment in that home, we need to say something about it. And so anybody who works with children in the state of California is considered a mandated reporter. And when you look at the data, 5 children per day are being abused. So if you look at in the kindergarten, first grade, second, third grade classroom, that could be 25% of those students that are in your classroom. Hopefully not, but the data has shown that, and these are the reported cases that we know about. When you dig more into this, there's a lot of cases of child abuse that are not reported, particularly in the state of California. So based on what we know and estimating what is not being reported, it's very important that we recognize the signs of child abuse and that we report it when it's suspected. And you'll notice that I'm always using the word suspected because it is not our job as mandated reporters to determine whether the allegations are valid. If a child says something to you that leads you to believe that there's possible abuse happening at home, you have to report it. So when I was talking to a child once after school, he said, you know, sometimes my mom gets high and she hits me. I had to report that. That's suspected child abuse. And so it wasn't, and I had to report it. I couldn't go to my administrator and say, this student said this to me, please take care of it. Because the child said it directly to me, I had to take on the responsibility of calling Child Protective Services and filing that report. Okay, so it's just if it's reasonably suspected. Then what happens is the report is made, they do some investigation, and then I received a letter that gave me a follow-up information based on that report and what was found. No supervisor or administrator can inhibit a report or subject the reporting person to any sanction. You are protected by law. If you make a report, that you're protected by law, even if it comes out that there is no abuse happening. It's actually worse for you not to report than for you to report and find out that there actually is not anything happening in the home. Okay? You are required to give your name when making a report. However, your identity is kept confidential. Okay? And so you can say, I want to remain anonymous, and your name is not shared with the family in any way. Okay? You have immunity from state criminal or civil liability for reporting as required. Okay? So there is protection for re-reporting. Now, if you fail to report a suspected case of abuse, and they find out about it and it comes back, it is punishable by up to 6 months in jail and or up to a $1,000 fine. So again, if you do report and they find that there's no evidence of abuse, you don't need to worry about any consequences coming back to you. If you fail to report and they know you knew about the suspected abuse and did not report, this is the consequence that you may potentially face in the state of California. Okay, so the process to report, when you find out or get a hold of information of a suspected child abuse, you can inform your admin before reporting to get help, but you are the one who needs to call local authorities, or you can call directly on the child abuse hotline with the Department of Child and Family Services as soon as possible. They will collect all information that you have it and file the written report, and then they will take it from there and investigate the suspected child abuse. Okay. I know that's a heavy topic, but it is such an important topic that we want to make sure everyone's aware of. And then the next legal responsibility is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, also known as FERPA. Ideally, this protects student educational records from being shared to other non-authorized people. So as a substitute, you do have some rights to student information. You do not have the right to share that information with anyone outside of that classroom. Okay. So here's some don'ts. Don't use educational technology that your school does not have a contract for. If you decide to use an application that is outside of the school district's recommended applications and it asks for students' information, for example, their student ID or their email, you are sharing student information that you should not be sharing. Don't send student grades and other information via email. Parents, usually if they want their child's grades, and this would be if you're in a long-term sub, there's a lot of schools have a lot of applications for parents to access their child's grades. For example, in Pasadena, we have Parent Portal. Parents need to sign up for an account. So if you're in a long-term position and a parent emails you asking for their grades, definitely refer them to the Parent Portal to get that information. Or for sure talk to the administrator on campus about the best way to share that in a safe way. But you don't want to just start emailing parents about their child's grades. Don't post students' personal information online, and don't use social networks to connect with students, or to connect students with classroom pages and events without parental consent. Okay. This one, I mean, this one can be tricky. So it's just safe to make sure that you just don't share any student information, period. Even in talking in the hallway with a teacher, you can easily be violating FERPA, because if I'm talking to my colleague in the hallway who doesn't have the student, and I'm sharing grades and progress and all of that, that colleague does not have access to that personal information. Okay. I see a lot of chat messages.
I have a question. So let's say, how about if we're just like in a library with a student, and then the student says, oh, you know, like any other parent, her parents, like, or his parents, they argue, but doesn't give like and then if we ask them, okay, you get hit, and the student says no, should we report or no? That's a difficult situation.
I don't think that's reportable, because that's not child abuse. If the child is not being neglected or abused or harmed in any way, that one's is. But if it's just the parents arguing, and Dr. Cortez,
domestic violence, no, it's good to report.
No.
Again, you have to be suspected abuse, and if there's something that really concerns you, you can always call the protective services and talk to them, and they might say to you, we don't really feel a need to investigate this, right? And that's okay. So if you're really unsure, you can always call, and they'll tell you.
There's also mandated reporter training and armaturist training that can help you better identify what is abuse and what is not.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I did one time for one of the districts that I work assistant. I did the mandated. I had to get a certificate. Yeah, it was like very like not in details, so it's very difficult. And then, you know, sometimes like the CFS gives the kid to the abuser. So some people, they report it, but they lie at the reporting, and then the kid ends up with the abuser. That's what happened to my case. Like my son is with my abuser right now, you know? And my son is like, doesn't know anything about foster care. He's like, he'd rather be in a foster care. And that really hurt my feelings. And I don't have money to hire attorney for my kid to get my kid back. And I was the best parent, going to field trips, volunteering for the school, donating for the school, you know? It's very difficult.
It is difficult. It's difficult for educators and teachers, you know, whenever they have to do that. But then once you make the report, then that becomes in the hands of somebody else to investigate and figure out what's going on, you know. And that's just for, as teachers, all we do is just, we want to help take care of the students, and you know, it's not falsely, you know, trying to get anybody. It's just you just want to be concerned for the student, and then let the protective services, you know, take care of what they feel needs to happen after that. All right, so we want to get into the give you a chance. One of the things that we recognize is, if you're becoming a substitute teacher, there's the possibility that you can walk into a classroom without any plans. It's a rare thing, but it could happen. You know, something happened to the teacher, like I said, last minute. They were too sick, they weren't able to do it. And so the principal or whoever takes you to the classroom says, oh, you need to be in this classroom, but there's no plans. They might say, oh, the kids are on this particular place in the books, but there may not be any plans. Or you might have plans, and then you realize you're getting through them really quick. And it's like, what am I going to do in the afternoon after lunch? So what we want to do is give you an opportunity right now to start thinking about, all right, I want to be prepared. I want to have an emergency curriculum. I want to have some lesson plans already in my back pocket, so that if I go there and something happens, I can just pull out one of these lesson plans and I can do it, right? If you never need it, great. But just in case, that way you're the most prepared, so that way it's not, you're not trying to figure out what to do at the last minute, but you're ready to go. Great, I have something prepared. So what we want to do, if you go to the next slide, so this is what we're going to ask you to do. We're going to give you probably about 20 minutes for you to go into a breakout room. And into the breakout room, what we want you to do is go to one of these sites, the last one, readworks.org, Achieve the Core, Better Lesson, Learning for Justice, and you can even Google in like lesson plans for educators, anything like that, that you could take a look and find a lesson plan. And then we want you to choose 2 lessons or create 2 lessons from 2 different grades, just so that you would feel prepared or know where to go. You can work with your partner or your partners about like, hey, what did you find? What did I find? You can do a little jigsaw, and each of you take one of these areas, one of these sites, and look it up. Whatever you guys feel works best for you right now. Try to find a site that maybe not on here so you can kind of share with the group. When we come back, after 20 minutes, what we want you to do is then we're going to have time for you guys to share what lessons you found, what you thought you might be effective, what site you went to, where you found it. We'll give some time for that. Think about some of the, and I know it's hard to think back to them, but maybe think about some of the instructional strategies that we talked about. Are there any that you might be able to use in your lesson? So again, about 20 minutes for you to go through these sites, find some lessons or create some lessons, talk with your group about the lessons, and then be ready to share when we come back. All right? Okay, we'll see you guys in about 20 minutes. Starting the recording.
All right, welcome back. We now, for this time, I hope you guys had an opportunity to find a few websites, at least you can, bookmark, go back to them. Really identified some resources that will be helpful to you as you're in the classroom, or, as when you walk into the classroom, you just have those resources now you can fall back to. You have that emergency lesson plan. So I am now going to introduce the wonderful Ms. Hannah Lee from Pasadena Unified School District. I have been fortunate to work with Hannah in a variety of roles and responsibilities. Most recently, she joined the district office in the Human Resources department as a director of a program that we have with the Graduate University to support incoming teachers and those looking to be teachers. And so we've asked her to join us today to talk from the HR perspective, what you can expect when you are searching for a job to become a substitute. So I will hand it off to Hannah. Welcome,
Thank you,
Hannah.
Jodi. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you on this Saturday. Over here, it's really warm. So I was invited by Dr. Marchesso to come and talk a little bit about the process of becoming a sub, right? Because now is a good time. There's a lot of sub shortages. So to come into this and do this right now is a really good time. So there's kind of 2 processes that you have to follow. So the first one is that you need to get your sub permit. And the way you get your sub permit is through the CCTC. So the CCTC stands for the California Commission of Teacher Credentialing. And if you go to their website, which I can drop into the chat right now, it's just cctc.gov. If you go to that site, you will be able to apply for what is called a 30-day sub permit. Now, the name is really confusing because a lot of people think, well, does that mean I can only sub for 30 days? It means that you can sub for the whole year, but you can only sub for one classroom for a maximum of 30 days. Okay, so don't think of it, the name is really kind of confusing. I'm not sure why they called it that. But in order to get a 30-day sub permit, from my knowledge at this point, you have to submit a couple of things like your transcripts, a copy of your CBEST passage, the application form filled out, and you can do this all online. Perfect. Thank you, Jodi, for dropping it in the chat. And so that I just want to let you know that if you are interested, even have a remote idea, a thought of becoming a sub, I would apply now, because it takes between 30 to 60 to 90, I'd say right now, 60 to 90 days for your paperwork to get processed. So I have people who have come to HR asking for their paperwork to be processed through the CCTC, and I can see right now that the application status is they are processing applications received before August 31 of 2021. So as you can see, they're behind. So I would suggest that you apply as soon as you can. Yes.
Does it require to have CBEST or something document more?
Yes, so that's a great question, Mr. Musa. So yes, you have to submit your degree, copy of your degree, so your transcripts.
Bachelor, like bachelor?
Yes, sir, that's right.
Or master?
And then a copy that you have passed all your CBEST. Now, there may be some leeway if you think that, so what has happened is there's new legislation out right now that parts of the CBEST may be waived if you have certain undergraduate coursework. But in order for you to know whether you have coursework that fulfills any of those parts of the CBEST, because there's 3 parts to the CBEST, you can also submit to the CCTC along with your application. Well, you will have to submit a copy of your transcripts anyways, but ask for them to be reviewed so that they can let you know whether parts of the CBEST could be waived if you haven't taken it, okay? But districts such as Pasadena, which I work for, still do require the sub permit with a copy of your CBEST passage. So just be aware that maybe there might be some leeway. That's something you'll have to investigate a little bit more, okay?
Yes, but for my case, I have a master's degree of science.
Oh, so you may have some undergrad coursework or master's degree coursework for sure that may fulfill either the math, the reading, or the writing requirement. So it's worth having your transcripts reviewed. And
but no way to waive this CBEST.
Perhaps through your coursework, so they would have to look at it. Okay.
Okay.
So that's the CCTC side. Are there any questions anymore about the CCTC side?
Yes, I have a question. For example,
yes.
The CBEST is waived only for during COVID-19, or it's like this is going to be always the same?
That's such a great question. Right now, it is totally from here on, not just for during COVID.
Oh,
that's
yeah, they have really tried to kind of open the doors to encourage people to become subs and to become teachers and enter the teaching field. So this is a great thing for those of you who may have struggled with parts of the CBEST before. You may have some parts of it waived, depending on your.
This is but this is application for next year, not this year.
No, it's for this year. It's for this year.
But if it has 30 or more 60 days to approve, the time is almost by the end.
I see what your point is. Hopefully it will get assessed a little bit earlier and within 30 days. If you're lucky and you get it assessed earlier, then you could become a sub before the end of the school year for sure.
And the procedure after we're having this 30 days.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you about that now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to talk specifically about Pasadena Unified, which is the district that I work in. But there may, I think the procedures at other districts are pretty much the same. So what happens is when you apply to Pasadena, you apply through EdJoin. EdJoin is a major search engine for jobs. Maybe we can put it in the chat as well, Jodi, the EdJoin. So you join EdJoin and you can filter down by the area that you want and then even by the district that you want. So for example, let's say I go to Pasadena Unified, there will be a job listing to become a substitute. It's an open pool. And so you would apply to that. And when you apply to become a substitute in Pasadena, you have to submit a couple of things. You have to submit your sub permit, which you got from the CCTC. You have to submit your resume, 3 letters of rec, and that's it, okay? Once everything is reviewed by HR, if everything looks good, then you will be contacted to schedule an interview with someone in HR. Either the director of HR or even myself would be on the Pasadena side. So it's a really quick interview. It lasts honestly 15 minutes or less. We just want to make sure that everything checks out, that you have some basic classroom management skills for subbing in a classroom. And then if things go through, then you will then be given a new hire packet to fill out, just with your further things such as a negative test, TB test, a fingerprint or a live scan, and we can show you where to go. We know a couple places around where we are that are cheaper to obtain a live scan result. And then after that, that's it. Once all those things check out, you then are entered into a system called SmartFind Express. That's what we use in Pasadena. And through SmartFind Express, you can even filter what grade level you want to sub in, what even school site maybe that you even want to go. You can filter down really down to the details. And you can say what days you're available, what days you're not. And if things change, you're going to be given an orientation virtually anyways on SmartFind Express. So you can go in and make those customized changes for yourself. Once all that is through, then you will be contacted through SmartFind Express. They'll usually, depending on when the teacher put in the request, you'll be called. It does a random call out, and the first person who picks up the job gets the job. So that's really basically how it works. Right now in Pasadena, we're and this is during COVID time, so I just do want to clarify this. During COVID time, we have upped our sub rate because we do have a shortage of subs in our district. So a daily rate is $200. So it's really nice. If you do long-term subbing in our district, that means you work in one classroom for 17 consecutive days. Like after that, after you start the 18th day, that is considered long-term. And then you get paid the long-term rate, which is $250. So that's pretty much all I wanted to share, but I'm sure there might be some questions that I can help you with. Yes, many districts in California have increased their sub rate, and we are one of them to remain competitive. So kind of let me sum up again, okay? So to get your sub permit, go to CCTC, submit to them all the paperwork. Do that as soon as you can, because it does take time, like we said, for them to process your paperwork. Once you have your sub permit, then you can apply to a specific district that you want through EdJoin, for example. That's where Pasadena posts their substitute opening pool for the pool. Are there any questions? Let's see. With recommendations from us, I know there's a need for educational field I do not have one. With recommendation letters, no, recommendation letters do not necessarily need to be from an educational field for at least for Pasadena. I mean, it's always preferable, right? Because they want to see that you've had experience, but no, it's not necessary. Okay, let me see another question. Is it generally allowed to assign kids work through Google Classroom for one of those sites you mentioned, or is it best to plan or print or project a lesson? So I think I heard Mr. Cortez say a little bit before when I just joined that you do want to come kind of like with a general lesson plan, just in case the teacher did not have a chance to leave you one. In Pasadena, we are required as teachers to have a Canvas page so that if there is ever an absence, a teacher absence, that the children, when you go into substitute, the children could go into Canvas and access the assignments for the day. And actually, we have asked teachers to have emergency lesson plans already in Canvas. So that situation shouldn't really happen if you were a sub, say, in our district. But I would, if I know this is open to all districts, so I would come with just a general lesson plan. And what I mean by that are, when I used to sub a long time ago, I would, maybe bring in a short story that that I could use, maybe a K-5 I could use with them, and then maybe one for middle school, maybe one for high school, where we could delve into the book and do a study of the characters or whatever. Maybe some general math sheets or worksheets for certain age levels. So I would do that. But I guess your question is, can you assign them one of those sites like ReadWorks? Definitely, you can.
I'm going to add to that though, just you want to be prepared. Like earlier I talked about predictive problem solving. So you want to be prepared for both a tech-rich classroom and a less tech-rich classroom, depending on the teacher. So the teacher may give you access to Canvas or the Google Classroom, or you may not have access to those things. So you definitely want to walk in with hard copies of things in case the students don't have access to devices on that day, or each school site, each district is a little different in how they have provided technology to their students. So definitely walk into that classroom with a variety of plans and ideas of what you're going to do in case something is not left for you. I mean, ideally, there's always going to be a plan, but it's just better if you also have a backup plan ready to go, because you don't know, until you get to know the school, you don't necessarily know what you're going to be walking into those first couple of days.
Yeah, very good advice. Very good advice. There was a question in the chat for me about when does the long-term rate start in PUSD? So it's after serving for 17 consecutive days in the classroom, in one classroom. Then on the 18th day that you sub for that classroom, that's when the long-term rate kicks in. Okay. Communication log, so that the next teacher is aware of what is going on in the class. That is heaven. Okay. When I come back as a teacher and I see that a sub has left me a little note telling me how the day went, it just makes a world of difference. It makes you stand out too. I would also clean up the room, make sure everything's back in order, right? There's nothing worse than coming back and seeing, oh my gosh, there's trash everywhere, and things are, so try to take the time after kids leave to kind of straighten up the room a little bit, leave a little quick note, give your name and phone number if you are comfortable, because if you did a good job and my kids liked you, I'm going to call you again. And not only will I won't just send out a Smart Find Express, I will specifically ask you for you by name, right? So I can say, oh yeah, I want Nicole, or oh yeah, I want Carolina to come to sub for me, because she did it before, she knows my class, she knows my routines. So yes, leave a little message and it makes a world of difference.
I just want to add to that my wife, in the district that she works in, they can request subs too. So it does make a difference if there's someone that they work with that they really like, they'll request that person again. So it's a good way for you to get more work, once they see how you work and how you help out with their student. The other thing I just want to add, if you want to do some substitute training, teacher work while you're waiting for your permit, again, we mentioned private schools, and the biggest private schools system usually is the Catholic Church. You don't have to be Catholic to teach in the Catholic Church, but you can contact your local diocese and tell them that you're interested in doing some substitute teaching, because each school usually kind of creates their own pool. They're not pulling from somewhere, they just have their own list of names of people that they call. So that could be a way, as you're waiting for your permit, if you want to pick up some work, that could be an area where you can do that. Okay. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we want to thank Hannah for being here and for your help. So we really do appreciate that. And again, these are similar to every district. You can contact your local district and kind of just say, hey, what is the procedure for becoming a substitute teacher? And as Hannah mentioned, every district right now is looking for substitute teachers. So there's a shortage right now. Now you're seeing a shortage of teachers. We're seeing a shortage of substitute teachers. So you're taking the right step at the right time. So, all right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, thank you guys for your time. Again, we are recording this. We will make it available. We'll let you know. They have your email. They'll send you where the link you can access it from, and then you can go back and review any of the things we talked about. And we wish you the best of luck on your future endeavor.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Excuse me. We hope this is a step to you actually going in full-time teaching.
Thank you so much.
I have a question for Miss Lee, actually, before the meeting is ended. Miss Lee, so what happens after the 30 days extension? I mean, how many times can you be extended if you're still needed as a long-term substitute teacher?
Oh, that's a great question, Laura. So like I said, the name 30-day sub permit is really misleading. It's good for a year. It just means that when you can't substitute for a person, for one single teacher for more than 30 days, because you should be paid the long-term rate. So that's really what it means. So you don't have to keep applying. You only apply after 1 year, because your sub permit is good for a year. So after a year, you have to apply again. Does that make sense?
I see. So when the 30-day long-term assignment ends, it just gets extended?
Correct.
Until the end of the school year?
Correct.
Or
however long they need you.
Yeah.
Or yes.
You can work for multiple teachers for 30 days. That's what it just means, that you can't for one teacher for 30 days. So
I see. As a resident sub teacher, I can sub for many teachers in the same school.
Oh, yes.
And my long-term assignment can be extended until the end of the school year. I was just wondering if this extension has limits, or it can be extended until when I'm needed in the school.
You are there until you are no longer needed.
Oh, I see. So there are no limits for these extensions.
No.
As long as I have my active subbing permits with the CTC, right?
That is correct.
Which I have to reactivate each year, basically.
Yes.
There is a fee to make it active again, because it expires every year, for what I understood.
That is correct. But if you already have one, to renew is not as hard. It doesn't take as long. It's the first time that you apply that takes the longest.
Okay, that's a good piece of news. Thank you so much.
And know that you are so appreciated by the teachers and the district. I know we really value our substitutes, because we know that you're a hot commodity right now. So you're valued.
All right, thank you.
Question. Hi, everybody. Just a quick question on the application process for on the CTC website. Is everything automated to where you just do everything online, or do we have to submit transcripts in the mail, or can we upload those online as well?
You can upload all those online now, Carrie.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Okay, thank you.
I have one last question, Ms. Lee, sorry.
No.
In the case I am not a resident sub-teacher and I am on a daily call,
Yes.
May I work for multiple school districts?
You can be called by multiple districts, and then you just choose the one you want to work for that day.
I see. So I can basically send my resume and transcripts and CBEST and everything as I did already for one district to the other districts and be on a daily call.
Yep. Yep. Increase your chances of getting called. Yep.
I see. Unless I just stay with my resident sub in assignment in one school district and particularly in one school. I see.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. I just want to understand what the options are.
Yeah, before COVID, I would say apply to a whole bunch of districts that are near you and then get called, right? And then see which one you can pick and choose. But now, if there's a certain district you like, there's no shortage of jobs. You can stick with one and they'll call you. You'll have a job every day. Don't worry.
All right. That's a good piece of news. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Again, thank you guys. Thank you everyone for coming. I hope you got some valuable information. And again, thank you guys very much and continue good luck in your future endeavors. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was a game changer.
Thank you.
Thank you.